Season 2 is in the books, or in the show. Wait, yeah, we took a long look at each episode individually, as is our wont, and it sure does make sense to take a look at the whole thing, the whole shebang. Look at the episode, the season as a whole, right? The blacks and greens as individuals will do that, and as units, including their allies and those undeclared, as well as the plot lines in play. We'll be less focused on predictions and what's to come. That'll be a topic for another day. There's plenty to say about that, but we'll parse things out here. So much happened that it's easy to forget where it began, and in order to properly make predictions, we gotta make sure we got a strong hold on everything that's already happened to date. So our thoughts on the season in its entirety, our favorite performances, moments, things like that, some meta-analysis on the situation vis-a-vis HBO, a few Easter eggs. You could say this episode summarized would be how it started versus how it's going with regards to season 2. But we've got that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. If you're watching live, well, welcome back to Sundays, our very familiar time slot of 3 Eastern. We've been holding down this slot for quite a while. It doesn't really make sense to do during the TV season because of when the episodes air, but whenever it's not full swing, we drift back to Sunday. So here we are. This is where we'll be for the time being until the next TV season. So find us every Sunday at 3 on YouTube, live streaming, or with the occasional rerun, because we're not here every Sunday, just most Sundays. Sean, I see that you are wearing a Denver shirt showing your hometown. Me, I'm wearing a Green Man, which...
Your hometown, too?
My hometown, yeah. I live in Green Man, Georgia.
It is really green here, actually.
It is quite green, yeah. We're having... Georgia isn't as hot as a lot of places would be. You might think Georgia would be hotter, but it hasn't been any less humid, which is, that's... The greenery goes crazy here.
And we are all green men
right.
On this podcast because we've all cosplayed the Green Men, like Green Man, Always Sunny, matched up with A Song of Ice and Fire. So I love that shirt you got.
And if you're not watching, you might be surprised to find out that my Green Man shirt is not green. But Sean's Denver shirt is black. So we kind of have green and black going here, even though one's only in word, not color.
We got a comment from Books Immersed who said, does Sean purposely have a background that's complementary orange against Aziz's blues? If so, that's awesome. If not, also awesome. And I said it was Ice and Fire. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. We kind of, it's kind of an accident, but we kind of noticed it worked out, and we're like, Sean, I know you've changed your posters around, but this one was like, whoa, this is the best it's ever worked. Yeah. Yeah, this is the best contrast we've had. And what do you got to drink there today, Sean? Anything special? Ooh, okay. Well, that's a very special beverage. Kind of magical in its own way. For multiple reasons. If you have questions for us about the season or about any book topics or just about anything in general, feel free to drop them here in the chat if you're watching live, or hit us up at westeroshistory@gmail.com if you're catching this later. And what's that?
Sean was muted during that.
Oh. Sean was muted during his talk. Let's do that again then. Sean, what were you saying?
I was muted for that whole section.
Afraid so.
No worries, I could say it again. I'm pretty sure I can remember that I was saying this is my Magic Mind drink, and that it's which is a green drink on its own, and I've mixed it with the Naked Green Machine, and also the what do you call it? The Sparkling Ice Coconut Pineapple. And also, I just feel the drive to mention this isn't just a Denver shirt; it's a Denver Nuggets shirt, and our star player Nikola Jokic just almost beat the U.S. Basketball finals in the Olympics. Like, it's like the NBA All-Stars versus Jokic, and it was a close game.
Wow. I'm not a fan of basketball so much, but I am a fan of nuggets, so I do appreciate the shirt. Yeah, nuggets, it's just a great word. Like, when is a nugget bad? Like, nuggets are always good, right? It's a positive connotation. The end of the season also brings back the return of our Trivia questions. It's a little much for us to have included during the season when there's so much to talk about, but I'm glad to bring it back. And we have a show-related trivia question. We've mentioned a couple of times that Jefferson Hall, who plays Tyland and Jason Lannister, he is one man playing twins, was also the actor who played Sir Hugh of the Vale in season 1 of Game of Thrones. There are at least 2 other actors who were in both House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. These are pretty hard to know. One of these I discovered on my own. I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere. And I say at least because it's entirely possible there's another 1 or 2 that I didn't catch. So if you know of any actors who were in both House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, name them. And if you name one, if you get it right or name one that I haven't named, well, you get a shout out at the end here. I mean, I haven't poured through every actor's IMDb page, but I have poured through most of them. So I expect that I caught them, but there might be another sneaky one in there. I will give you all a clue. They're both men, the one that I found. So if there are the 2 that I found. So if you find a woman that's been in both, well, you already know that you found one that I didn't. Let's start with our favorite performances for the season. Later, we'll talk about the season as a whole individually, like Sean will give his take, Shay will give hers, I'll give mine. But let's start with the way we like to start our in-season episodes by describing who we thought was our favorite actors. And we're going to do a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. Told Sean and Shay, define that however you want. I'm going to pick a main actor, then one who was maybe second tier, then who was third tier. That's how I'm going to do it, but y'all do it however you want. Sean, start with you.
For me, number 1 is definitely Emma Darcy. They were, I feel like, the most impressive and got the most airtime. I just love their nuance and the types of emotions they're struggling with to portray, and the character themselves is intriguing. You know, I could say the same for at least a dozen other people in the show, but Emma Darcy is the one that really stood out the most to me. After that, it's a little closer. It's a little tighter. Like I think I have my next 2 picked out, but it's just like the slightest little nudge could completely put 2 new people in and put them out. I think Eve Best. It was spoiler. One of my favorite scenes from the whole show was when she had to turn back around and face Vhagar. That moment in Red Dragon and a Gold. I think it was that episode.
You had a spoiler in our recap, in our wrap-up episode. How could you? What?
But you know, she had a few other nuanced moments too. And then the third, I think, is Fabian Frankel. I think, you know, maybe I'm a little biased by the wanting to defend the Kristen Cole character, but still, I think that moment in that final episode when he was talking to Gwen was really powerful. And a couple other times too, even when he's doing something, you know, maybe frustrating. Here's what I'll say is, I think for me, and I bet for all of you too, every time he's on screen, some emotion is being evoked. And so,
yeah, some people are just like seething.
Yeah,
it definitely lessened as the season went on for me because, like you said, like this performance has been really good, and that's moving.
Less to seethe about, and he started getting less screen time also. But still, those if I'm pressed, Emma Darcy, easy number 1. Those 2, I guess, are my number 2. But I wouldn't argue with anyone. There's a dozen others I easily could have picked.
Well said, Sean. What about you, Ashaya? It's really hard, isn't it? That's what she said.
Yeah, you know, on a different day, I could have picked 3 completely different names than what I'm about to say. I could have said Emma Darcy as Rhaenyra, you know. I might have said Alice Rivers. I might have said Simon Strong. That's not the names I'm going to say today. Today I was called to say Tom Glencarney as Aegon, who captured such a transformation from the beginning of his arc to the end, who underwent so much prosthetic work, who made me feel for someone that I don't have any, I didn't think I would feel for, and who I'm riveted by whenever he's on the screen. And who's always very funny as well simultaneously, even at his darkest moments. The scene with Laris when they're just like talking past each other, he still amused me a bit there. So all the props to Tom. My second pick will be Alan Abu, who played Alan of Hull, because of that last episode. I think he really, both the performance and the character, because like I wanted to give kind of a shout out to a character that I genuinely like and think is kind of a decent person, honorable, and I'm excited to see in season 3, and I expect him to to be a good man, I guess. And I'm excited for more of Alan. And my tertiary one, I will say, and this is hard. This one was harder, which is why I said Simon for that one as well. Simon Strong. I'm gonna say Ulf. Arguable because maybe he is on the secondary tier with Alan. Like, they're kind of similar levels. They both kind of had their own plot line. That's how I was kind of trying to define it. Who had their own plot line versus who was a player in someone else's plot line. You know what I mean? And Simon Strong was a player in Damon's plot line, whereas Ulf kind of was his own. So I don't know if that's if I should say someone even more minor, but I like a humorous character. I like a funny guy, and I appreciated that performance a whole lot.
Bet you considered Gwaine very strongly then too, given that.
I did, and I think he fits tertiary better because he is he's part of everyone else's story. It's not about him. Yeah, he
doesn't have any scenes that are about him, but Ulf has. That's a pretty good way to categorize it. Like I said, I let y'all decide the categorizations, and that's a pretty good way to do it. My turn?
Yes.
Cool. So, yeah, it is really tough. I want to shout out Matt Smith because he's great, but yeah, Emma Darcy is just too good. They're just so amazing. It's hard to top them. They're just they're by the end of it, we'll be using words like goat and things like that. I think because this is roughly halfway through the story. There's so much more. In fact, there's more episodes with Emma Darcy coming than there have been so far. That's one thing I think about that's kind of baffling or strange to like kind of hard to swallow or realize. Even if they keep it at 8 episodes, which I hope they don't, but even if they do, that's 16. So if they don't, it'll be 20 or maybe somewhere in between, like 18. They've only been in 13 so far. There's only been 18 so far. So yeah, by the end of it, I mean, we got more Emma Darcy coming than we've had so far. So in some ways, we're not at the halfway point of them, but we are at the halfway point of the show. So that's pretty cool. I also want to give Aegon, Tom Glencarney, my second place. I loved him all the way through. I was very impressed by him. He really did have a range, which a lot of the characters, it's not their fault. They just weren't given the material to have a full range of on top to all the way at the bottom. Right? Like, this is a man feeling himself out as king, to afraid his brother's going to kill him, to having to like retreat ignominiously in a cart full of ravens. Probably smells terrible, and he's obviously his body is in pain. So he got some of the most rangy material and just knocked it out of the park. So I definitely got to call him out. For my third, it's difficult. Like you all said, it's really hard to pick, especially when you've already named 2 and you're like, oh, I've only got one more? Oh no, who do I? I kind of think I want to give it to Fabian as well. It's real close. I'm tempted to give it to a Gwaine or an Ulf as well. They're both really, for similar reasons. Gwaine also showed us a lot of range despite being a pretty minor character. We saw him as a foppish, like, I can do whatever I want. I'm a rich, privileged kid, to like very serious and at war, and just quite a range for such a small role. And Ulf, kind of similar. I mean, we haven't seen him maybe at his worst yet, but we've seen him at a pretty expansive number of scenes. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Fabian because, partly because, like Sean said, it's you get the full range, you get a lot of character change, and it's a character that I had a strong I had an opinion about him well before the show started, and Fabian's acting has helped me like center that a little more. It's like, don't let your feelings in the character shouldn't affect how you judge the performance. In fact, sometimes that gives them more credit, or if anything, and I think that really came through here. So I don't have a single actor I would say that they just weren't good. There's no one I would point to and say that was a bad actor. None of them, I would say. So this is just remains, along with the music, the casting remains.
Just a real diva, though.
Vermithor's a real diva. Yeah, I don't know. Silverwing was kind of overacting in that one scene. Yeah. What's up with that?
Over the top, flying over King's Landing there.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody was so into that dog. It was clearly just a premium. That dog was just stealing scenes. Like, I hear it was a real pain to work with too. Just always shedding everywhere. No, seriously, even the animals were amazing. Even the rats did a great job, right? The ravens were on point and on pinions. Solan sends a super chat. Thanks for the coverage all season. Really enjoyed listening to your podcast while at work. We appreciate it. That's when I do a lot of my podcast listening. It's while I'm doing chores or working. So I know the feeling. It is really nice to have something entertaining to do while you're doing something tedious. And that is a big part of where podcast fits into our lives, I think. So a few meta things that went down that were just coming out in the news right when the season was ending, really kind of just after it. So some of this didn't make a lot of podcasts or YouTube channels because of it arrived so late in the game. And the news was that HBO / Warner Brothers lost just an absurd amount of money, like $10 billion, which is kind of hard to imagine how they did that. Like, how? Like, who lent them this much money? Like, where did they get, like, how? Like, wait, what? How is it possible to lose $10 billion? Like, I wonder that when someone loses, like, a few $1 million at a casino. Like, wait, how did you withdraw all those funds to lose them? Like, no ATM will give you that. You went to the bank and said, yes, give me $1 million in cash. Like, I know there's, like, wire transfers and stuff, but still, it just blows my mind, just the sheer scale of it all. And that's why HBO cut the end of several shows, not just House of the Dragon, but also Last of Us and probably some other ones too. But the fact that they're doing it to two of their most successful shows is it's a bad sign about how they manage their finances.
You know, I thought a lot about how they could lose that much money. And it occurred to me that they've got a lot of projects going on. And a lot of these big superhero movies are like, you know, nearly $1 billion ventures. You know, they spend hundreds of $1 millions to make them and then make hundreds of millions of dollars back. And so they might have lost 10 billion, but that could be deceiving. It's not like they have no assets and owe $10 billion. They spent 100 billion and lost 90 billion. Oh, or made 90 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And some of these movies are still making money. Like Deadpool and Wolverine is over $1 billion gross for right now. And I don't know if that's even factored in because that's this year. And I doubt that counts for last year's losses. So that's a big amount of money. They've certainly made money on that movie, for example.
And I mentioned that I think I mentioned this, that a lot of the expense of just House of the Dragon, for example, it's an investment. For next season, they already have like the dragon mount thing that they ride on, and they've already worked out the flamethrower to burn people with, and they have the volume built for a lot of the expense they've had for the first couple seasons they get to keep using for the next couple seasons.
Yeah, some of it. Now, we can't make the mistake of thinking that all of it. For example, we know that the season 1 set for a high tide was awesome, but they didn't have that for season 2. It probably would have cost them more to keep it than otherwise, because they would have had to like rent that space for 2 years until they used it again and keep all that place clean and everything. So yeah, it isn't always worked that way, but Sean is right. That's a thing. But there is another wrinkle here that I think that casts the studios in an even worse light. And I want to say all these things because I don't want people to blame the show. Blame the show for other things if you want. Certainly, they're not criticism free. They still wrote what they wrote. And you may or may not like everything they wrote, and that's fine. You may not like every casting or every decision, whatever you. That's fine. But what I want to make clear is that HBO spent a lot of this money, maybe not HBO, but Warner, because that's the parent company. Some of the reason they incurred so much fees is because they weren't trying to pay the writers properly. They were saving that money, and they were spending that money on legal fees rather than paying the writers what they're worth, rather than paying these people what they deserve. And that's why we got the writer's strike. Now, of course, that's not just Warner. That was an industry-wide American, right? It also wasn't in other countries, but obviously America is very important for such things. We're kind of the center of a lot of these productions in the first place. So that had an adverse impact. Their strategy of trying to bust the unions and not give in to reasonable demands, not give in to reasonable concerns about the future of AI with voice acting and things like that. These are very, legitimate things to negotiate over. So the studios did the thing that studios often do. They were very corporate about it. They treated their employees like enemies. And that had an adverse effect on a lot of shows, like House of the Dragon. So when they were forced to cut the season short, it was in part because of budgetary concerns caused by their own selfishness, their own greed, compounded by the writer's strike actually making it hard to make changes to the script after the fact, once they were told they had to change it. So again, this doesn't absolve Ryan Condal and Sarah Hess of whatever particular criticisms you might have about things that are more within the realm of the show. But in terms of like what they had to work with, they were kicked around a lot. They were given a lot of strange restrictions that you wouldn't expect for such a successful show. Normally, the really successful shows are like, well, yeah, do whatever you want. Here's more money. It's like, that's not what happened here because of prior mistakes and because of their going to war with their own writers and industry wide. So anyway, make of that as you will, but it's important to keep in mind these things when you're judging as a whole, because that's a big factor that they don't want you to know. They want you to blame the show, but, I think the studio deserves a fair share, a lion's share, a dragon's share of the blame here, which some people may not even have any blame to distribute at all. But if you do, yeah. On the other hand, on the positive side, it's number 1 on the Nielsen's for streaming, House of the Dragon. So there you go. Again, it's still successful. This, even if it wasn't as successful as season 1, still highly successful, still very well received by the general public. I know that a lot of y'all are deep in the fandom if you're listening to us, so you may not know how well it was received in general.
I loved it for what it's worth. We'll probably talk more generally about our overall thoughts, but I didn't finish this off thinking, man, I wonder what happened behind the scenes to ruin it. I was like, man, this is awesome. Oh, it could have been better. Hey, I was happy anyway. That's my take.
That's pretty much how I was too. But doing this as we do, having done it for several years, I sort of guess how other people are going to react based on what happened. And I knew this finale would have some criticism. Even though I personally agree with you, I was very happy with it. Sure, I wished it had been 2 episodes longer. I wish it had been episode 8 of 10 instead of just episode 8 of 8. But yeah, anyway, we've beaten that horse to death.
Yeah, I do know that my sister and my parents-in-law are a little frustrated. They were waiting for some big climactic action scene battle at the end. And I get that. Of course, I get that, especially having to wait 2 years for the next season instead of 1 more. But also, maybe I'm unique. Maybe I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm not watching this for some big climactic battle scene. I'm watching this for nuanced performances, for political intrigue. And it's cool when they have dragons on screen that look real. When a battle happens, it matters to me more because I care about the characters involved.
It's more gripping when it looks good.
For it to be good.
Yeah, I agree. And if it's done poorly, it can take you out of it. Like there's some action that's done so badly that you're like, ooh. That's becomes the story, how bad the action was. So yeah, it's almost like a lot of jobs, if like air traffic controllers, like if they do their job, everything's great, and you only really notice if something goes wrong. It's like, oh man.
Can I say?
Yeah, Shay, go ahead.
I don't often talk to my family about the show. I don't know. It's just not really something that comes up. They watch it. My dad and mom have watched it at certain levels. My dad, I talked to him recently, and he had like all these questions for me after the end of that finale. He's like, I want to know who dies, who's gonna die, and he was
wow.
really. Yeah, he was very invested suddenly, like more than he'd ever been, right? And he's like, who's going to die in this big battle? I'm like, well, what battle? Like, there's multiple battles about to happen. Like, there's land battles and sea battles, and you don't know where the dragons will pop up in these battles. Like, which battle are you talking about? And he was like, wait, they're not all going to fight, like, at one central... Like, he kind of had this thought that they were all, like, armoring to
one super battle.
Yeah, so anyway, so that was kind of interesting. And then he just really... I was like, well, who do you want to live, And he was like, I really like the mud wrestling lady.
Sherrock will win new fans.
Yeah, he said that's his new favorite character. Anyways, I was so surprised. It was a pleasant surprise for me. I didn't expect him to say her.
That's awesome. Go Lohar. They go Lohar, we go Highhar. Yeah. So yeah, that's great. I love hearing stories about how like people who aren't like super fans like us and take it in and enjoy it. And I don't remember if I pointed this out already, but it bears repeating anyway because it's quick and noteworthy here. In the first 2 books of A Song of Ice and Fire, there's 2 on-screen battles. That's it. There's a bunch of battles, but they're just not on page. They're just described after the fact, or you hear about them. Or Battle of the Whispering Wood, Catelyn's like there, but she sees very little of it. You can call that 2.5 maybe. But it's just the Battle of Blackwater and the Battle of the Green Fork through Tyrion's point of view. That's it. And in the show, Game of Thrones show, there's only the Battle of Blackwater in the first 2 seasons. That is it. That is the only battle in all of the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. So they're pretty much aligned there. Each of the shows has one major battle before in the first 2 seasons, and that's it. And I'd say the Hot D's one major battle was a lot more spectacular than the Battle of Blackwater. But Battle of Blackwater was awesome. Like it had, like you said, Sean, it was very plot relevant. It had a lot. Like it wasn't just about the battle; it was about the people inside the castle and elsewhere. So yeah,
and even more so in Battle of Blackwater was it sort of interspliced with, I don't know, dramatic elements, just conversations between, like, sometimes I see that as like a criticism. It's just people in rooms talking. Like, that's all any show is. That is what. But Battle of Blackwater would go back and forth. A couple of my favorite moments came from that episode, or maybe even that battle, but they weren't battle. It was when Sansa was taunting Joffrey into leading from the vanguard, and when Stannis said thousands, like those were the good moments. I don't care if Sandor chopped some guy down with a whatever, just.
But Sandor talking to Bronn in the bar beforehand, when that was cool. Like that was more interesting than him fighting.
So tense and both developing and revealing, if you will.
Yeah, that was really good. So, and I thought, certainly Rook's Rest had its own angles to that, with people on the ground and being helpless. And it was really strong for similar reasons. They put the stakes there and they put the characters there. And we cared. One thing I want to talk about here to set us up for the larger discussions for this episode is looking back at what the themes of the episode were. We always did put a bit of effort into each episode and kind of coming up with what was the overarching messages or recurring aspects of the episode. So number one, the first episode, we had duty. That was a big theme. And then winter is coming.
I have heard you say that word more than I'd ever like to hear.
Duty.
It got to a point where, in our breakdown episodes, I was like, "Is he gonna say it? Yeah."
He's gonna say duty.
Yeah,
again,
he is.
It's a word that starts to sound annoying when you hear it over and over. It's not like other words. Then episode 2 was more of the sacrifice side of duty, although this kind of bled over the 2 episodes. Then revenge and escalation. Episode 3 continued that with cycles of violence, when something escalates and plays out over the course of centuries, or it returns after being dormant. We also had these last-ditch efforts to stop the war, which were perhaps futile, but also perhaps worthy. Well, Aegon the Conqueror was a major theme of episode 3. His memory, his vibes, his armor, his history, all those things. Episode 4 was pure war, the unleashing of the dragons, and all the consequences that meant, whether it was the damage they caused, the death of certain people, or how people like Kristen Cole viewed war going forward. Episode 5 was a major power shift. Aemon becomes regent. Meanwhile, there's questions of leadership with people like Alicent and Rhaenyra herself, and then there's grief. In episode 6, we saw the concept of power held over the more powerful. In other words, people of lesser power controlling or manipulating people above them, whether, and the episode title was Small Folk, so it starts at the bottom, whether you're talking about people throwing fish at Alicent, or whether we're talking about Mazzaria or Larys getting in close with Aegon and Rhaenyra, the monarchs. Episode 7 took the concept of ordainment from above to a new level, where the will of the gods and that which the gods choose, remember, dragons are considered gods in this context, was huge, as Vermithor and Seasmoke chose their riders, and Silverwing as well, along with Rhaenyra believing her destiny is part of this. The final episode teased that which is to come, whether we're talking Daenerys far in the future, or the outcome of the war, or the lives of certain individuals like Daemon and Aemond. The unlocking of great powers. The dragons taking to wing, these new dragons with their new dragon riders. Well, not new dragons, but dormant dragons now ridden again, as well as the return of certain powers that have always been there, like the old gods and all that. Not to mention armies on the march towards one big uber battle. No, not one big uber battle. Towards many different battles, naval, land. Who knows what who knows what will happen with the dragons in the air? Yeah. Any comments on that, Sean or Ashea?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I thought that there were 3, and I'm sure I wouldn't argue if someone said no, not so much, or there's this other one too. But I felt like there were 3 overarching themes throughout. One was this sort of destiny versus decision thing, the will of the gods, you're saying, or whatever. A lot of times the characters are, finding or trying to find their role in the bigger picture, right? Rhaenyra starts to make some of her decisions based on the idea that, like, hey, the dragons chose these riders. It must be part of some bigger plan. And her dad told her about this prophecy for the future that now Daemon has seen. And so sometimes that might make people feel justified in some of what they're doing, when they think it is part of a bigger thing. And I can't help this. It's just part of what I have to do to fulfill this prophecy, Then I think identity. I think a lot of characters through the course of this have gone through some identity changes, sometimes based on the role they have or the amount of power that they have, but also just seeing the effects of their decisions on their lives and their loved ones has made them question it and maybe change what they should be, what they think they should be doing or whatever. Maybe Cole and Allison maybe are the most clear examples of that. Although maybe they are ones who they're starting to regret or question the decisions they made. I feel like Rhaenyra's identity might be starting to abandon some of her restraint. that piece of her identity might go away, because that leads me to, I think, the third prominent theme, which is the horrors of war. That several episodes and several characters throughout the course of this seem to be resisting war in every way they can, and it just seems to be becoming less and less possible. But we're already starting to see the results of it. And I think to whatever extent you want to compare the dragons to like nuclear bombs, even aside from nuclear bombs, we were firebombing the heck out of Germany and Japan before we ever launched a nuclear bomb. We did way more damage with firebombing than we did with the atomic bombs. And Aegon, he happens to be the king. He's a central character, so we're paying attention to him. But God, I can't imagine how many thousands of people were suffering those same types of burns due to war. You know what I mean? He's just the one we're kind of seeing now, but we hear at a sharp point, thousands of people were killed. Probably a lot more are left with scarring burns and broken limbs, and same thing at Rook's Rest. And to me, I'm almost glad they don't focus on it more because it's so disturbing.
I hear that. Yeah. Super chat from Merlin's Milkers brings up a great concept, something we should talk about. Merlin's Milkers, yeah. I didn't know Merlin was so endowed. Is Merlin's been gender flipped now? Okay, I'm down with that.
No, just has big titties.
Just has big titties. Okay, they don't actually have milk. It's just the term. Okay.
Maybe he has minions that milk cows. He just likes milk a lot.
He's got a squad called Merlin's Milkers. They're always out there on the farm doing great work with those cows. Merlin's Milkers says, thanks for the content, y'all. Season 1 didn't have crazy battles, but it was still rated higher. I think the main issue for most people this season was pacing, not lack of battles. Well, let's define most people. I think if you're talking about listeners of our show, I think I would probably agree to that. I think the wider fandom complained about the lack of battles. I agree that I think like y'all, for our listeners, didn't complain about that at all.
I think people complaining about the lack of battles was them not being able to articulate what they felt was off. I think they were sensing a pacing issue and just like putting it into words by saying that, but I think they would have been happy if the pacing was different regardless. I
think that's very fair to say. I think a lot of people are not great at articulating their criticisms, and sometimes that just causes people to argue because it's like, well, that's because they don't necessarily articulate their criticism very well. It doesn't mean their criticism isn't valid. That just means they aren't able to communicate it super well. And then if you argue with someone or debate someone based on what they've said rather than what they're trying to say, then that can really get you off track, and that can cause arguments rather than debates, I think. And so I tend to somewhat agree that the pacing wasn't as good this season. I wouldn't say it was bad, but I'd say that season one's pacing was also very unusual because
with all the time jumps.
It had massive time jumps almost every episode, where this entire season probably only covered a few months, whereas the first season covered like 25 years. So like it's already a massive change in the way the time passes during the show.
I've made this sort of comment before too, by the way. Sometimes it's expectations. If someone says, hey, I'm going to give you $100. Oh, wow, for free? Yeah, thanks, cool. And then they give you $95. They're like, hey, this is only $95. You said $100. Like, I didn't have to give you anything. Like, you should be happy for the $95. And now I don't think that's necessarily even the best analogy, because I think that people, for example, I've seen a lot of complaints about like Daemon, floundering in Harrenhal, right? And I think that's because people expected Daemon to go to Harrenhal and kick butt. They thought he was going to stab someone with a sword and burn someone with his dragon. And that didn't happen. Something different happened. And so they kept being disappointed or surprised or waiting for it, and it wasn't coming. But if that wasn't what you were expecting in the first place, if what you were expecting was a dramatic analysis of his internal grief, well, then this is it. That's awesome. And that's exactly what you got. And I think that's $105, not $90. I think that's more than if he had just gone and chopped a couple heads off or something. He eventually did chop a head off, but it was a very meaningful moment when he did. So I think sometimes it comes from expectations. And I think you can even test my theory by rewatching the season. I think if you rewatch the season as you go through that, you won't be frustrated there wasn't a battle at the end of each one, because you already know there's not. And instead, you'll pay more attention to what is happening, which is very interesting, very well directed, very well performed, etc. So.
Yeah, that's well said. I think I mostly agree with that. And back to Merlin's milker's point, it's hard to say that without laughing. So yeah, I think the pacing is a fair complaint. It's obviously a big difference from the first season, but I think a lot of that is also just the source material. Like this is what George gave them. They condensed 30 years into 25 years, and that gave them a lot of things to work with because they had to skip things. This time, they weren't skipping much from the book because there wasn't much to skip. It's like a couple of paragraphs here and there that describe these massive grand events that they had to fill in a lot of blanks for. And I think that was part of it, is like you're expecting them to fill in blanks. But the blanks for season 1 are a little more straightforward. I think the blanks for this one is like, well, what was Daemon doing at Harrenhal all that time? That's from the book. It doesn't sound like he was doing much at all. So having all this come out of nowhere, it goes against expectations. Even people who have positive expectations or were happy with that probably didn't see all that coming. So yeah, I think you're right. Expectations has a lot to do with it. And whenever you have a season 1, you kind of expect season 2 to maybe have more payoff. But that's not really how the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones went. That's not how the first 2 books went. And it's not what Ryan Condal said. Ryan Condal told us season 2 would be setting up and preparing. It's, it is more like a Game of Thrones, a Clash of Kings, a Storm of Swords. That's what season 3 is setting up to be. Frey Girl, that's with an A, not an E, so it's not House Frey Girl. Let's be clear. Could Alice or one of her family line be Old Nan? She knew about the antlers. It's possible. I mean, really hard to say who Alice's relatives are or who her family line is. Old Nan never came off to me as someone that had specifically magical insight. She had insight into magical things, but she herself is not a supernatural being. Could be wrong. Someone who knows a lot about those things. But I can't say it's impossible. I mean, the timeline fits. It's a pretty easy timeline to fit. Alice is, probably Old Nan would have been born around the time of Maester Aemon, which would have been in around the year 200, 198, something like that. So a good 60, 70 years after the Dance of the Dragons. Well, we've already seen that Alice Rivers is a lot older than she looks, so who's to say she can't live on? I don't know if such a being can have children, Can you keep having children if you have this extended life? But based on a few things from the book, we can't rule it out. So we are going to talk about Alice Rivers more. We have an episode planned with Joe Magician in 2 weeks from now. So we'll talk about this in a little more detail with him. I know he has some theories, and some of the things I can't say because I don't want to spoil Sean. So we'll come back for that episode, and we'll get into this a little deeper, Frey Girl and everyone else. Let's talk about the greens. We'll start with the greens. In the second half, we'll talk about the blacks. Alicent. Starting with Alicent. So one thing that we talked about early that kind of fell off because it ceased to be a plot point, at least temporarily, maybe it'll come back, which is her relationship with Kristen Cole. Who knows about it? And does it matter that people know about it? Otto probably knows. Gwaine definitely knows. And Larys most certainly knows. Now, Larys has fled the capital, so what's he even going to do with that information? Gwaine is on campaign with Cole, and neither of them may survive, and Otto's in prison. So the people that could spill the beans are not really in a place to do so, and would it even matter if they did? I'm not sure. Like, Alicent, this relationship started after her husband died. It would really be more of a problem for Kristen than it would be for her, I think. What do you think, Sean? How do you view this relationship now that it's at least temporarily in the rearview mirror, maybe for good?
Yeah, there's a part of me that feels like it should be done for good. I think there's a part of them that still cares for, maybe loves each other, is concerned for each other at least. But I think also that the separation that happened both emotionally and physically throughout the course of the season is probably going to end them romantically, but not their love for each other. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it does, yeah.
And I don't know how much more they will get to interact in person anymore, but I think Cole's vows to the Kingsguard are going to retake hold, if you will, and it'll be torn. But I think she maybe even will understand that and understand they can't really have a relationship that she wants or needs. But I don't know if it's going to matter, their relationship itself, or people who might know about it. I don't know what good anyone would get from talking. If things turned around somehow, like let's say the Greens win this war and take power and Alicent is effectively leading because Aegon's died or missing or what, I could see some scenario where she effectively is back in power. Then someone might want to blackmail her and or Cole. But I got to say, I don't really foresee that happening. So I don't think anyone is really motivated. I can imagine a few other people knowing about this, by the way. I can imagine there being some chambermaid or one of the Kingsguard.
That's how Lars would have found out,
at least being aware of it. Maybe they're not certain or they don't have proof. But I think those people also would have little to gain by telling anyone. They're probably going to endanger their own lives more than anything by telling anyone about it. So.
That's probably true. Yeah, you wonder, too, if Lars is left. He's fled, but he's probably still got spies that he's left behind in his household that could send him things. He's got money to give them for their information. So they certainly have an incentive beyond just loyalty, because I don't know if that would be enough. Another aspect to Alicent's story that we didn't see any progress in the last few episodes, but we saw several earlier, was her digging into books. And I wonder if that's going to continue and if she's going to learn anything more about that, or whether that will ultimately matter, or whether that's just a plot thread that they've abandoned.
Rhaenyra is one of those scrolls now too, isn't she?
She is. You're right, with that really brilliant framing shot. Yeah.
I'm just making a kind of dirty joke.
She's going to go deep into that scroll. Unroll that one. Yeah. So that's something I'm curious about. And one reason that I'm thinking about in particular is that she's fallen from power. That was one of her major arcs this season, is her slow, but also kind of sudden loss of power. It's like it was slow, like drop a level, drop completely, right? Just, you're no longer on the council even, right? So this gives her more time for being a mother and maybe doing research. And certainly her turn to motherhood has been very interesting, because she's like, well, I can't save my sons, but I can save my daughter and my granddaughter. So that's very interesting. This gets into predictions territory, but it does show where her mind is at, where she wants to save Helena and Jaehaera. Will she be able to? Where would they even go? All these questions that are for later. Let's talk about Aemond. Aemond's personality probably doesn't change a lot, although he's confronted with something that might shift his personality at the end here. We haven't seen his full reaction to the events of episode 8, which are probably other than him being promoted, which made him more of himself than he ever was. He just became more Aemond. He hasn't met with proper resistance. He's met with lots of disagreement, lots of people saying you shouldn't do that, lots of people telling him it's a mistake. He mostly just plows through all that. So the consequences of any of these mistakes haven't fully manifested. For example, the Triarchy. Everybody's like, don't make an alliance with the Triarchy, because in the long run, blah, blah, blah will happen. Well, we haven't gotten to the long run yet. The short term, they may very well help. And that we haven't even seen that yet. So there's a lot of things that have to play out with. But just consider how it started. Remember early episode 1, Aegon brought Aemond to council, and Alicent was like, what's he doing here? Which sort of frames why Aemond wanted Alicent gone later, because he was like, what? She was objecting to him being there, and then he kicked her out. But also just the idea that Aegon was like, my brother's so loyal. I can set him like a dog on my foes. That's what he said to his Drinkingsguard before they were Drinkingsguard. Like, whoops. Like, think about that. Like, whoops, that was That was kind of
Yeah, Aegon really thought too highly of his brother. He was very naive with that. I mean, it's kind of a good quality in a lot of ways. You don't want to just be a paranoid person who's like looking over your shoulder. Like, I don't know. I kind of like that quality. Like, I think it would have been more sensible for him to be suspicious of Aemond from the get-go. You know what I mean? Like, that would have been sensible, but I think it's admirable that he would really and truly trust and love his brother. And be mean and bully him and all of these things. Like, again, Aegon has been terrible to Aemond. But I think he never thought that Aemond would stand up to him. So maybe that's a less charitable view of it, right? That rather than about the love and trust, that he just never thought Aemond would actually be a man and stand up against him. I don't know.
I think that he thought too much of his brother and too little of his brother. And he is just too self-centered to appropriately think about his brother at all. Does that make sense? That he would just assume he could use him as a tool however he wanted, whenever he wanted. If I want to make fun of someone, I'll make fun of my brother. If I want someone to be on my side when I say let's go to war, I'll give my brother, So he potentially could have had a better ally in Aemond, right? That was in the council. Like, he wanted his brother there because he knew his brother would be on board with let's go to war. But outside the council, he treated his brother like crap. So outside the council, his brother burned him.
Yep. I mean, that's a good way to put it. He could have made an ally of his brother, but he's not good. Like a lot of people in his position, a lot of privileged people who are underparented, and even some who were parented properly or overparented, they don't think through the consequences of their actions very well because they're immune. They're immune to a lot of the consequences of their own actions because of that great level of privilege and the king messed up. Okay, that's fine. You just, like, when he gets away with rape, for example, like, what better example is that? I mean, a lot of rich, privileged people can get away with crimes like that. In the real world, that happens all the time. Sad to say, but not a surprise to anyone to hear it. So he's a person that grew up with not experiencing the consequences of his own actions, and now he is. Like, he taunts his brother, and his brother pays him back 100-fold. Now, to be fair, yes, Aemon's disloyalty started before that. He was plotting with Kristen Cole on the sly and making plans and all this other stuff. And this just shows Aemon's arc a bit. He has a high opinion of himself that just gets bigger and bigger as the season goes on until he's finally confronted the person he perhaps least expected to stand up to him. Obviously, his mother's been standing up to him this whole time, but he kind of just like pushes her aside and ignores her, or just does an end around, like, well, I'll just come back to Helena when she's not there, when Alicent's not there, and talk to her again. Our mom doesn't understand. Oh, I understand. I saw you burn our brother. He couldn't have predicted she would stand up to him, and he certainly couldn't predict the reasoning for her standing up to him, the evidence that she has. He couldn't imagine she would have that. So his whole worldview is thrown off. His whole position is thrown off. His authority has been rejected for the first time. And he hasn't built loyalty. Not only did he do a worse job of getting his own family on his side than Aegon did, but he's turned his own council against him. Think about this. Council sessions were a regular feature of the early part of the season. Aemon's just kind of semi-dissolved the council, right? Like, Ironrod, it was like an Orwell, like, that's it. Like,
you didn't mean it specifically, but if semi-dissolved means half dissolved, it went from 8 to 4.
Yeah.
And in the last meetings, one person wasn't even there.
Yeah. And Larys is gone now, so there's really only 3. I think it's just Ironrod, Orwell, and Aemond, and yeah. Aemon's flying all over the place, burning cities.
About to leave.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
so it'll be
council before he goes. Probably not.
Well, so it'll be Helena. Will Helena hold a council meeting? Will we even get a single moment of her ruling? I don't know, but that's what Alicent said, is Helena will be the authority. Yeah. But I assume Helena's the authority, and Ironrod is handling the day to day, and he comes to Helena and says, "Hey, Helena, can we do that?" I really would like to see this play out. I know we're about to see just Rhaenyra swoop in, but I actually would love to see that.
That would be cool. And a lot of Aemon's attitude seems to be, yeah, look, I'm the best. I have the biggest dragon. Well, how does his worldview get affected by the fact that, well, now there's all these other big dragons. So you know you're not the most powerful. Maybe individually you are, but your side isn't. So how does that affect his worldview, his going forward? Well, that's a conversation for another time. But certainly that's how things end for him. He's on a meteoric rise that he doesn't realize is very problematic, because he doesn't understand how many bad decisions he's made, because the long term hasn't played out yet. And now he all of a sudden is confronted by perhaps the least likely person in his family to confront him, and that's very surprising to him.
Another thing you need to think about is a lot of the mistakes he made, he still might not really face those consequences, because it's not really a mistake he made that caused Rhaenyra to get more dragon riders, right? He'll feel like that's just this unfair thing to happen, or the will of the gods, or another thing he has to overcome. Not that I messed up by closing the city gates to the people or the merchant ships or whatever else. You won't think any of those were mistakes.
Yeah, he may not find out the whole chain of events that led to all that. And you're right. He'll certainly find another way to blame, like he did with the blockade. He's like, why are they blaming us for the blockade? That's Rhaenyra's blockade. He's like, yeah, but you're the one in charge. You're supposed to feed the people no matter what. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, the blame, it's annoying that they're blaming you, but it doesn't change your responsibility. But he doesn't see it as responsibility. He sees it as a privilege. I think that's a big part of his view of everything. Aegon II, on the other hand, started with a few positive instincts. He's definitely naive, but he wanted to win the people over, which was a good instinct. That was smart, even whether he had the right logic behind all that or not. But he pretty quickly loses his grip when his son is murdered. He goes from giving them what they want to giving them reasons to riot and turn on him, and then he just compounds that by making more rash decisions and starting to drink heavily, culminating with one particularly rash decision that was brought on by drinking. So like the two things really came together there for Rook's Rest, and that changed his outlook dramatically. So he went from trying to be a good king to having to being the most powerful man in the kingdom to running off with Larys in a box full of ravens. Like, that is a dramatic change for him. Technically still the king, though, in a manner of speaking. He's ordained and crowned, and that counts for a lot of people. Even if his family gets run out of King's Landing, there would still be people that believe his claim is superior. So I'd say one of the biggest changes, and perhaps one of the most interesting ways to point to his arc, is that he started off trying to not be like his father and just ended up more and more like his father the more he went through it. He got to this point for different reasons. Like, his father didn't lose his health because of one battle, but it was because of the throne, right? It was being king did these things to him. He's walking with a cane. His face is half burned. He's not going to have a son, like, because he can't have a son, just like Viserys couldn't have a son, until he could, but not with the wife he wanted to. So there's a lot of parallels there, and I think that's pretty dark, but also pretty clever storytelling to have him kind of turn this way and be like the man he didn't want to be. I'm particularly enamored of that. That's honestly part of the reason I voted for Aegon, for Tom Glencarny as an actor too, because I particularly like the writing for his storyline. Any thoughts there, Sean or Ashea, or should we move on to the next character?
I think we can move on.
Cool. Otto. Not a lot to say about Otto, but he's a more simple description to his arc for the season. A voice of reason, despite being highly responsible for the situation in the first place. This is like, hey, I wanted to create this, but not this. I wanted to create a more orderly version of this, which maybe was foolish in the first place to think that was ever possible. Still, his arc is in a position of power, advising the king to in a box. And we don't even know who has him. That is also a very big turn, right? Even with Gwaine Hightower halfway through the season just kind of telling us, don't worry about it. Otto Hightower is a man of means, a man of, he'll give us news when there's news to tell. Like, oh, will he? Okay. So, yeah. So that is kind of weird that we all disliked Otto for his decisions, loved his acting, and now it's kind of like, man, these Greens would be better off with Otto. Right?
Yeah, I wasn't a particular Otto hater. I think he made some mistakes, but I think usually his mistakes were more in his communication and his empathy, more so than the actual choice that was being made, if that makes sense. I think sometimes he was making tough choices that I wish no one had to make. but that, if you are in this position where you have this responsibility for these people and this administration and et cetera, then, well, sometimes, maybe there's some systemic problems that these choices have to be made in the first place, right? But given that there's going to be, a change in power, given that you're going to have these leaders decided based on order of birth, given you're going to have that and the conflicts that come from it, I think Otto's doing the best that he can. I wish, going back into the roots of some of this, that through his life, he could have been fighting some of the sexism that was going to keep Rhaenyra from being accepted, instead of it being sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So him deciding the men of the realm won't accept this, so I need another plan. He could have decided, how can I make the men of the realm accept this? I think that's the real mistake that he made. But that's not unique to Otto, right? That's not like some crazy mistake Otto made. That's almost every single character in the show, including most of the women, are making that mistake. So, but it is hard to see him make these tough decisions. We don't see the internal grief that he has, like Daemon. Like we see Daemon do some awful things, and he seems cocky and arrogant about it. But it was revealed in this season that he had some turmoil inside him. I bet Otto does too, and we would feel more for him if we saw that. And
That's
maybe
fair.
we will.
Yeah.
Maybe his course in prison might bring that out. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. That's interesting. And as I'll repeat, this is not exactly a book plot, so it's one of the ones that has us particularly curious because we don't know what they're doing with it. Kristen Cole. Yeah, we talked about him a little bit when we described Fabian's performance, and he had one of the bigger turns. Like, this is a guy that a little bit like Aegon, but for different reasons, because he doesn't have the privilege, and he's not the king, and he's not a Targaryen, and his upbringing was very different. But he goes from maybe a little too much power. He's got a lover, which he's not supposed to have, and then he's plotting with Aemond, and then becomes Hand, and then it just all reverses. He's a pretty effective leader. Morality aside, he does his job as a war leader pretty well in the Crown Lands, but then he's just traumatized by Rook's Rest. This is a veteran whose entire view of war is flipped based on what he's seen. And this is not unrealistic. In fact, it's very realistic. There are countless examples in real life of people who've been in 50 or more battles. The 51st battle breaks them, and their nerve, their trauma, it just piles up, or something finally breaks them. Not unrealistic at all. And in this case, you at least have something very specific to point to as what was different in this battle than all the other battles he'd been in. Clearly, the dragons. And then it goes downhill from there. Not only is he traumatized by Rook's Rest, he makes the mistake of thinking parading Meleys's head in the capital is going to be a good thing, and that backfires. Aemond stops treating him like an ally and like a subordinate. He has his falling out with Alicent. And then when he finally goes back to the field, he's extremely fatalistic, just expects to die, gives that brilliant speech that was really powerful, but also, as I said at the time, isn't exactly what you want to hear from a guy leading your army. It's like, geez, this guy is already dead. He's got one foot in the grave already. But that's just it was really well done, I thought. This is a big turn for his character, a big change. It's a compelling season-long arc that goes from like this man with a lot of confidence and almost cockiness to a man who's just like, what is this life that we have? Like this nothing. We're dust before the dragons. Yeah, it was really, really good.
I think he was assured. He had a very assured quality in himself. Like he was sure of himself, and I think he still is, just in a different way.
Sure that they're screwed. Yeah, he's sure that they're marching to their annihilation.
I think that I suspect that he might already have been experiencing. I'm hesitant to use exactly PTSD, but something like that.
I don't think you should be hesitant at all, Sean. I think it is like, if you can't have PTSD from the things he's gone through, then what could you ever have it for? Like, yeah, go ahead, but yes.
But I just think in those battles he was fighting, I think he was still disturbed by all the killing in general. Like, he probably killed a lot of people on his own, like his own sword plunged through the heart of multiple people, but ordered the death of even more, like telling 10,000 troops to attack 5,000 troops is going to kill way more than he could do on his own.
And executed many, which is different. That's killing someone
Right.
kind of in cold blood. It's not
Yeah.
the same as in the heat of battle.
And I think he may have been, throughout all that, able to, I don't know what word to use, bottle up, justify it, whatever it is, because it's part of this bigger mission to protect the king and to protect the throne and the sort of legacy of the rule of the realm. There's this sort of bigger picture goal, and a few thousand people might die, but in the end, we're going to have peace on the continent. But once that dragon just started burning people to death, he's like, whatever kind of justifications I had, whatever games I was playing in my mind to make it okay and go out and kill people, all my fine endeavors, they just don't matter anymore. None of that matters anymore. It doesn't matter if I'm a good commander. I don't have control over who's going to be king now. Like, I'm just going through the motions, and these dragons, these gods are really deciding for everyone. And in the meantime, am I a mass murderer? Can I just say I'm a soldier?
Are we the
following
baddies?
orders?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. You say it, you know, because they call him Kingmaker. You know, like he didn't really make any of these kings. Not really, not truly.
Yeah, his role wasn't any bigger than Otto or Alicent or yeah. But yeah, so we'll have to see how that plays out for him. He's become pretty interesting, definitely a lot more interesting than his book version, I'd say. Helena is even more blatantly changed from her book version, though, given these prophecies, which makes her a very interesting character. I very much enjoy what they've done with her and look forward to more. Her season begins with her losing her son and walking in on Kristen Cole and Alicent having sex and maybe having stitched a burial shroud for her son in advance. She forgives Alicent in a later scene, which we're still kind of wondering what that was about, or if it's still yet to come. Or
do you think she forgives her now? Now, in retrospect, with seeing Alicent's treason, do you think she forgave her for this act of treason?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that one yet. Good call. Yeah, that's a really good candidate. It might be a multi-layered, multi-tiered forgiveness, but that's a good one. That's maybe the best guess I've seen so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the treason hasn't played out because we haven't seen how that will play out with regards to Helena.
It's the last thing she does this season, or the last thing any Greens do.
Yeah.
Great call.
At the time, like the default for that was I forgive you for sleeping with Kristen, but we so often, and in fact, the Beast Beneath the Board seems to keep having new things that it might have been applying to. I think that I forgive you too, and I don't really even know how this is going to play out, of course, but Alicent has still, in her own mind, decided to sacrifice her son. So whether or not it happens or how it happens, Helena still might forgive her for that if she's aware that Alicent
also
made that
a good
decision.
point. Yeah, that's her brother, her husband. Yeah, the father to her child. So that is a pretty big deal. We also had the procession, the funeral, which she didn't like that, which we considered maybe that was something she was forgiving her for. She really didn't like doing that. She asked Aemon, was it worth the cost? And that's before we knew that she witnessed Rook's Rest in her dreams or visions. So she asked, was it worth the cost when he was standing there looking at the throne? Now, looking back on that scene, she really did know what the cost was. She had a fuller view of it than we could have been sure about at the time. Now we also have her make this comment about one of her crickets stopped singing. Still not so sure about that. We got some decent guesses, but I wouldn't say any of those are like, oh, that's definitely it. But there's some good guesses.
I saw an interview with Fia Saban where they gave her there's a couple of the guesses. They told her them, and she was like, oh, I hadn't really, she hadn't, she gave her answer was not about a prophecy. Her answer was no. Helena genuinely was upset that one of her crickets had stopped singing. That made her sad. She was being literal in that.
It wasn't prophetic.
It wasn't prophetic, is what she said. Not that she said she liked seeing the prophetic interpretations, but as an actress or whatever, in that moment when she's performing, when she's her read on it is what she's saying. That so that's interesting.
Well, every good red sewing needs a red herring.
Yeah.
Or green herring? Is it a green herring? I don't know. So it's pretty interesting to have an end of the season where the most peaceful character in the entire show probably is being dragged off to war, or he's trying to drag her off to war at the end, only for him or her to confront him in a way that he could have never dreamt of being confronted, as we explained when we talked about Aemon. Meanwhile, Alicent wants her to leave, and whether they're going to get to or not, or where they would even go, again, we have no idea. We talked about that with Alicent. And she appears in Daemon's dream, which is also pretty huge. And if Daemon and her ever come face to face, what would he say to her? What would she say to him? Like, yeah, hey, there you are. I saw you in the dream. Like, when's the last Daemon and Helena, have they ever had a conversation? Certainly they haven't on screen. I don't think they've even said a word to each other on screen. Certainly not a conversation, but that would be a conversation to have now. So this falls into the predictions territory, but like half everything Helena's, you can't talk about Helena and not talk about the future. It's like her whole character is predictions and prophecies and stuff. So yeah, but the big change to her, I think, was how her role in the story changed a lot, because she was a person that we would discuss, like, what do her prophecies mean? But no one in the story is talking about them. No one in the story is affected even the slightest by them. They just think she's weird. Like, okay, there's Helena being weird again. Happy clap for her. That's everybody's response to her. Or Rhaenyra, like, Helena? Why would I target Helena? She's the sweetest one. Like, she's not a threat. But here, at the climax in the final episode of the season, she tells a prophecy, multiples arguably, to her brother, revealing that she has this power. Now it's out in the open. Who else is going to find out? Who else is she going to tell? So that's a big ball of wax, a big Pandora's box. Helena's box is opened. Digby Smollett says, Helena's great. I don't buy that she doesn't like riding her dragon, though. She gives massive horse girl energy. No way would she not love Dreamfire.
Yeah.
She does love flying in the book.
But they have not shown us that quality in her, and they've even made it seem as if she doesn't like it in the show. And I think I agree with people's assessment that it is a way to cut costs and not film it.
It's a cut.
But I am disappointed.
Let me still say there's a difference between not liking riding her dragon, which may or may not be the case. They certainly haven't showed it much, but there's just not liking riding her dragon and not wanting to ride her dragon into battle to burn people to death.
They did make that distinction, though.
Yeah.
She did say, like, Rhaenyra said, Helena does not like riding her dragon.
Okay.
Yeah, so
it had nothing to do with fighting.
Yeah.
Also, she doesn't want to burn people. That's an even important. But no, she just doesn't like, she's just not into her dragon, which is definitely different from the book. She liked her dragon. However, even at this point in the story in the book, she'd stopped riding her dragon because she was so broken by blood and cheese that she'd stopped. So it gets us to a similar place. She's still more likely to fly in the show than she was in the book at this point.
Yeah, I would rather see her, like, now, maybe with all of these losses and being alone, she might go reconnect with her dragon. I don't know. She could end up at she could, by the end of the show, be close with her dragon as she was in the books. Like, we talk all about how characters can grow or regress or whatever. So we shouldn't assume that Helena is static and stagnant and will not at all have changes.
Yeah, I suspected that she might be, even though the show didn't seem to be presenting her as someone who's going to ride off in a war on her dragon. I thought she might jump at the chance to get revenge for her dead son, right? I thought there was a chance that would happen. But when she didn't, I was happy. She's like, I'm not going to burn anyone. I appreciated that. And I get that might be frustrating, maybe from on multiple levels, whether it's from the book or otherwise, that it's crazy. She wouldn't dig her dragon. And I didn't quite read it that way. Maybe I just missed a line of dialogue. But one or the other, I do think it's reasonable for someone to, even if you take it in a more realistic way, like someone might like horses. I like riding horses. I like my pet horse. I like to groom it and take care of it and draw pictures of it. Okay, get in your horse with a sword and go kill people. Hold on. I'm not doing that. It doesn't mean I don't like my horse.
Yeah.
I would also point to, I think, a comparison between Viserys and Helena, who I like comparing them. They kind of have some similarities. It's kind of sad we never really got any moments with Viserys and Helena, because, I mean, they both have their like hyper-fixation interests. But Viserys, was very uncomfortable with Balerion and talked about how it's a myth that we control these dragons, and he was also kind of attuned with dreams. And I don't know, I think of Viserys' discomfort when I think of Helena there, and so that resonates with me, at least, as much as I can be displeased with other parts. I kind of like there being another parallel between Viserys and Helena.
Yeah, I like that too. That parallel is good. Digby Smollett also says, I imagine to Helena, Daemon is the guy that cut that man's head off in the throne room. Yeah, he did kill Vaemond in front of everybody. And
I was wondering, like, in Daemon's mind, like, vice versa, like, what does he think of who Helena is? He's like, wait, that's Helena. Like he probably has not really thought much about her ever. Like, he recognizes, I don't know.
Because again, she doesn't ride her dragon very much. He probably doesn't perceive her as a threat.
Yeah, exactly. But, like, I know he would know her face. He would know who that is.
Yeah,
but,
he knows.
That Digby's comment really made me think about, like, who is Daemon to Helena? Who is Helena to Daemon?
Yeah, what are their view of each other? Yeah.
Daemon doesn't even think much of his own daughter, who does ride a dragon. So what in the world is he thinking about Helena?
And he's about to maybe have a second daughter with a dragon, too. Hey. One that's actually about the size of his, unlike Bela's, yeah. So, other members of the Greens that we aren't going to discuss, but individually, but I want to throw their names out there so we remember, as a summary of who's on their team. We got Tyland, we got Ironrod, we got Orwyle, we got Gwaine Hightower, we got Little Princess Jaehaera, we got Sir Rickard Thorne, and whoever else the Kingsguard are these days. I know there's been some turnover with the Drinkingsguard getting hired and fired, and Eric and Arak and all that. So there's probably been some changes there, some names we haven't heard yet. Prince Daeron barely entering the fray now with his dragon Tessarion along with the Hightower army. And they also lost a few people. Now, in terms of their allies, who they have, obviously I mentioned Prince Daeron and Tessarion with the Hightower armies that are on the march. Let's not forget they're a little bit delayed by their engagement with Reach armies that are not on their side, because there's a portion of the Reach that are either sworn to Rhaenyra already, they kept their oath from before, and or they're with the Beesburys, because really, what kind of overlord kills one of their own vassal lords? That goes against a lot of tenets of honor and the feudal system. So that's a very justifiable reason to turn on them. And the Tarleys and Beesburys aren't alone there in fighting against the Hightowers. We don't know exactly which houses. We have an idea from the books. It might be slightly different in the show. They haven't named all the houses. We'll just leave that for now. Lannister, pretty straightforward. They've marched out of the west. They're now in the Riverlands. The last we see them with an army and some lions. Yeah. The Crownlands are on their side. The Crownlands is pretty depleted thanks to Rook's Rest and all that, but they do have a few thousand men from there that Kristen Cole is currently leading towards Harrenhal. And now they have the Triarchy, which, as of the moment they set sail, the only note, probably Tyland sent a raven, but it may not have even gotten there yet, so they aren't factoring in this big navy that's now on their side. But it's a pretty substantial boon to their cause, even with the long-term set aside, as I mentioned. Regardless of what they might do, a year from now, having 100 ships or whatever that is come in to attack the Gullet where the Velaryon fleet is, well, you can see why the Greens would be enthused about that, especially because the Velaryons don't even see it coming at this point. They keep talking about, we're going to fight lions and krakens, and they don't mention the Triarchy. Let's not forget, though, that there's a Baratheon in the mix here. The Baratheons were like, yeah, we married our daughter to Aemond. We haven't heard a thing from them. Isn't that interesting, Sean? What do you make of that? Any like, this is the guy that got so mad about, like, they can't just make me, I'm not a dog to be called up to heel. Remember, that's what Aemond almost said the exact same thing when Lord Jason wanted him to come escort their army.
That is an interesting thought, or it's sparked several interesting thoughts. One is, even if they don't muster troops and join the battle, at least they're not turning against you. At least you're not defending against Storm's End, right? They are a very geographically nearby entity that you don't have to worry about, ostensibly. But did Aemon marry that girl?
It's a betrothal. You're right. It's a betrothal. They're not married. She was too young. She was too young. Yeah.
Okay. You did make me realize that nothing came from that, and so maybe that betrothal's enough. But maybe once the battle starts to happen, maybe if one of those Baratheon allies, someone that the Baratheons think of as an ally, but Aemon burns their town down, that might change their tune. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's definitely a situation to monitor. That's a lot of power that's not in the field yet. It doesn't even appear to have been marshaled. Like there weren't Baratheon armies marching. We saw a lot of armies marching, and that wasn't one of them. We weren't necessarily expecting them to, but it certainly is interesting. They're a powerful region. They're not the biggest region, but they're certainly not to be despised. Now, another factor to consider is that Dorne is independent, so both the Reach and the Stormlands, as having borders with Dorne in a time where they're not part of the same nation, means they do have to worry about that. Like, pulling their troops elsewhere might give the Dornish an opportunity. That's the last thing they want, is to let that happen. So that is at least a consideration for the Baratheon, but that can't be everything. That certainly isn't the whole story.
Would you say the Dornish are a wild card? Baby?
Hey, wild card, yes. Good reference. So let us run through real quick as well what the plots were for the Greens. I don't think we've covered most of these in our discussions, but if you have folks, reach out to us if any of these plot lines you feel need further discussion, or if you have questions about them. Maybe it's a good reason for us to circle back at some point. And by the way, the rest of the Reach, not only is it not clear which are fighting for the Blacks, there's other parts of the Reach that are with the Greens that haven't been specified yet too. So some of that will probably be explained as these things work themselves out. A lot of houses just haven't declared. They're still kind of waiting to see what happens. Like, I don't want to take a side until I can maybe join the winner, and it's not clear who the winner is. A lot of the houses probably don't even know that Rhaenyra has all these dragons yet. So, like, all the more reason to just let things play out until they have the full picture. Okay, so there's the plot of Alicent and Criston Cole's relationship, Aegon's crowning, Blood and Cheese, and the Ratcatchers, Eric Ark, the Crownlands campaign culminating in the trap of Rook's Rest, the victory that was not a victory, I suppose. Then following up the victory that was not a victory is the celebration that was not a celebration, Meleys's head going through the streets, followed by Aemon's regency, where nearly every decision he makes is objected to, but none of them are actually they all keep going. Like, no one actually stops him. Aegon's recovery and eventual escape. That's obviously a developing situation. The march on Harrenhal, still developing. Closure of gates and port inspections, that's been going on, but I wouldn't say that's peaked yet. Like, certainly it's getting worse and worse. Every day it gets worse. The alliance with the Triarchy, that's also brand new. The burning of Sharp Point, Aemon's general escalating fury and fear, which go together. Is he going to burn more places? How else is he going to lash out? Is he going to get control of himself? I just look at this list of leadership changes throughout the season for the Greens. Like, they're the party in power, at least by virtue of holding the crown and the Iron Throne, but they cannot agree even who is running things on their side. You got Otto out, Alicent out, Aegon in and then out again, Larys in and then out again, Aemond in and question mark, and now Alicent's betrayal at the end, like on top of all that. So who knows?
Criston Cole kind of out too.
Got
like
out,
he was
yeah.
promoted a hand, but he went off to battle, and Otto was called in. He's, to whatever extent he is maybe officially still a hand, he is not practically still a hand. So
the music they should have in the council chamber is musical chairs.
There's one other little plot point that maybe you guys don't even want to talk about too much because it could be potentially spoilery. But Aegon's dragon. There seemed to be some ambiguity as to whether it was dead. And in Aegon said, I think
I remain a Sunfire truther. I don't think Aegon knows. I think he's going to be as surprised as anyone that Sunfire's alive. Again, because just the rule of television, you usually see a body, and I think that's true here too.
Here's one thing about it, if I was going to nitpick a little, that one way or the other, I think it would be better known. I think that more people would have witnessed Aegon being burned by Aemond in the battle. Maybe not, but certainly people saw that dragon fall in the clearing in the woods, and there would either be reports of it crawling away or reports of people, the new, it would be like someone discovering gold. Like, there are all this dragon scale and dragon bone. There'd be value to it. People would be making weapons out of it or something. There would be some sort of like a spurn to the Greens that, like, we've got your dragon, or I don't know. I feel like some story would bubble forth from that, whether the dragon was dead or not. We haven't heard anything. So
yeah, it is interesting to see. There might be more to it. You're absolutely right. So that's the greens, I think. There's certainly some more nuance we could have gone on there, but I think those are the high points. Those are the characters. Those are where they stand in terms of the war. So yeah, hit us up if anything else you want us to cover with regards to that. But we'll call it there for the greens for now. We'll move on to the blacks in a minute. Want to shout out our good friends over at Magic Mind. I'm really enjoying their mental performance shots. It has gotten me through the season. We have so much work that we have to do during the season. It's fun work. We love covering the show, but it does get a bit hectic doing several episodes a week. Ashaya has huge amounts of editing to do. I have lots of writing to do, and that can really can be taxing. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of thinking.
I know a lot of you drink coffee, and so this is like, you're like, oh yeah, I'm so used to this type of thing, but I have never been a caffeine drinker or coffee or anything like that. So for me, it's been really nice to have my routine of, I get up, I make my drink with my Magic Mind in it, and I sit at my desk and I drink it and I start my workday, and it works for me. And again, if you're a long-term caffeine drinker, you're like, yeah, of course, that's how it works. That's how it works. I had never experienced that. I don't know. I hadn't.
It doesn't have much caffeine in it, but it does have a little, and it uses other ingredients to stimulate your brain. And some of these are long-term. We've done research on a lot of the ingredients, and several of them have had pretty rigorous testing, and definitely the claims are real. There's a few of them that actually give long-term benefit to memory and concentration and focus. These are peer-reviewed studies. No woo present here, my friends. And personally, I can vouch for it having helped. I can tell when I've been on it for a while, it starts to build up, and I'm able to wake up a little bit earlier, maybe focus a little bit longer, maybe my attention span lasts a little deeper into the evening than it might otherwise. Hard to say exactly, but absolutely I can tell it's helping out. And you all can get your own little sample pack by going to magicmind.com/VIP How Trial. That's VIP HOW Trial, HOW, of course, History of Westeros, to get 3 bottles of Magic Mind. They're this size. Look at how nice they are. And you can start your morning or your afternoon if you are a night person with 1 and then 2 and then 3 and see how it goes for you. And if you like it, well, then you can subscribe and get the full benefit. Bottoms up. That's good. Now my mind is more magical. That's right, friends. Go to magicmind.com/VIP How Trial. Get your 3 free bottles and see how it works for you. Also, we've been having lots of fun over on our Twitch account, our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/History of Westeros. And big news, the dragon content is coming this week. In fact, they have added dragons to the code. So we'll be starting a new campaign, either Blackfire or Targaryen, and playing with dragons. I have no idea what to expect. They had dragons in the earlier version of Crusader Kings 2. Those were fun. But this is Crusader Kings 3. Much better, much more developed, much better graphics. So I don't know what to expect, but I know it's going to be awesome. So come check us out at twitch.tv/History of Westeros. Every Friday at 6 p.m. we stream. And my streams have been getting longer and longer as we get deeper into the game.
It was 5 hours on Friday night. Aziz just couldn't stop being Renly the Beautiful.
I was Renly, yeah. I was Renly. Renly somehow had like 10 children with Marjorie. He also had a little side piece man, but, he needed to father heirs. We finished that stream off by becoming Daenerys invaded and went to war with Robert, because Robert was still king at this point. This is obviously a different timeline. And Stannis was still alive as the Prince of Dragonstone. And so we just said, hey, Dany versus Robert, this is our time to declare independence. So I became the new Storm King, an independent nation, after Dany won and defeated Robert. Funny thing, she defeated Robert. Robert's still her heir because she can't have kids. And so I seduced Daenerys with my incredible, overwhelming charisma. Renly has the highest diplomacy score I've ever seen on a character. So he just befriended her and charmed her and bedded her, even though he's not into women. And so that is hopefully going to help him keep his kingdom independent, although we're done with that season, done with that now that we're going to start over and play with dragons. But it was a good story.
Does Renly always have that high diplomacy stat, or just this timeline that you're in? Or
he's born with a lot of natural talent in that regard, and I developed it. Yeah, he's okay. Like being good looking helps with charisma, and then he also just has some basic stats that help with that. Like he's got a good diplomacy stat to start with, and then I just did a lot of things to boost it even more.
So Fabian Franco should be really high in that.
yeah, sure.
Kristen Cole, anyway.
Met Fan Man says, "You all are great. Also, can I get your current guesses on where the 4 seasons of Hot D end?" You can get that in a different episode. We are going to do that, but we can't do it today because Sean is unsullied. He doesn't know the end. He doesn't read.
It would be kind of interesting. I don't know if it's going to be long. I would say Sean shouldn't do it, but I would be kind of interested in Sean as someone who's unsullied, who doesn't know where he thinks it'll end, what he thinks would be the ending. If you want him to do that at a different time, you can. But if you want to do it now, you could.
Okay, so Met Fan Man, we are going to talk about that. That's going to be a topic of discussion in a week or two, very soon. Well, probably not next week, but before too long, that we'll cover that, but we got to do it on a day Sean isn't here. So for now, we'll tease it by letting Sean take a few guesses. These are obviously a little bit more random. Again, Sean has not read The Dance of the Dragons. He doesn't know how it actually ends, so this is pure guesswork based on what you've seen so far.
I would say, Sean, I would like to know, maybe it's the same thing, but one, what your guess is, what you think is reasonable for what it could be, and maybe two, what you want it to be. Maybe those are the same thing, but I just want to give two. Those are two different things potentially.
Let me start by saying that I thought it was going to be 3 seasons. Only in this past couple of weeks have I realized that it's going to be 4 seasons. And I thought that next season was just going to be all the sort of conflict and battles that have been built up were going to play out through the season. And I thought that it might have sort of a tragic end with, an Ozymandias type of someone wins and they're ruling over ashes. All their friends and family and allies are all dead, but you're a king. Good job. You got what you wanted, or queen. But knowing it's going to be 4 seasons makes me think there must be whole new plot lines that are going to rise up. Because it's hard for me to think how it's really even going to be close with Rhaenyra having as many dragons as she does. So I wonder if through this next season, maybe 1 or 2 of the new dragon riders doesn't cooperate with her or turns the other side, or maybe they just get killed. Maybe they make mistakes or they don't have the experience and Aemon takes them out. Maybe, as we just brought up, the
Reasonable.
Stormlords. Yeah, maybe the Stormlords do get upset by something that Rhaenyra does and join the fray. And I guess I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if the Baratheons might have some dragon rider blood in him, right? Because wasn't the first Baratheon ostensibly Aegon the Conqueror's half brother or something? So
it's been a while, but yes, yeah, and there's been reinfusion here and there, but they don't have it. They don't have it recent, but they do have it. Yeah.
So maybe there's some potential for somehow they claim a dragon. Maybe the war somehow drags on for a long time. And maybe they do another time jump.
Drag on for a long time. Get it? Yeah.
Wish I could take credit for having done that on purpose. But yeah, I just put me on the spot. I have a hard time thinking of how it might go. I guess the one other thought maybe is that the 4th season, or a large chunk of the 4th season, is how it plays out. Maybe at the end of the 3rd season, someone has won, but knowing what's important to George, I haven't listened to so much of what he says and just observing how he writes. I think about this all the time for the main series, the main Song of Ice and Fire series. I have a hard time envisioning how it will quote unquote end, because let's just say Dany is queen, or Jon is, or Stannis, or whoever.
Who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
Yeah.
Who has a better story than Aegon the Broken, right? That's what Sean was going to... You're leading up to say, the end of the show, you envision Aegon is on the wooden throne, and he is ruling. Who has a better story? That's what you're saying. Thank you.
I just sort of forgot that Bran has a better story.
Whoever in A Song of Ice and Fire wins, if you will, who gets the throne, first of all, there's all kinds of other plot lines and characters that we care about that aren't connected to who gets the throne. Like, I don't know, Arya or Sandor, their how their life plays out isn't real dependent on who the monarch is. And also, it's not going to perfectly, whatever you might think of as a victory for Sansa or Arya or Quentin or all these different characters, it's not going to perfectly time with Dany takes the Iron Throne. These things are going to happen on different timelines. And I just don't see how George is going to perfectly tie all this up when what I think matters most to him, and maybe me too, is what do they do as the monarch, John or Danny or whoever wins. If it's Rhaenyra or Aegon comes back or Larys is a puppet, but like, what do they do? How do they reunite the realm? How do they manage going forward? Which dragons live? Are they still a threat? If Corlys's fleet gets destroyed by the Triarchy, is there? I feel like whoever wins this battle is just the beginning of a new story that maybe matters more than who wins this battle. Like, that's why we care about who wins this battle, because we care about how they will rule in the wake of it. And so that's what I would most like, is for season 3 to be a bunch of battle action and someone quote unquote wins. And in season 4 is what they do with the victory. And there's not a single battle or fight scene in the whole thing. It's just a straight political intrigue drama.
I do imagine that, yeah, season 3 will probably have the most battles. Season 4 will probably have fewer than season 3. That's probably true. Not just because, not purely based on like the books or whatever, but that's just kind of how it seems to, that would be a reasonable way to do it. Like this big season 3 be the action one and 4 have a little more of that than the aftermath. Yeah. That's a pretty good guess though, Sean. I like overall, I mean, hard to argue with that. It's a little bit, like you said, a little bit of what you expect mixed with a little bit of what you want. Yeah. Yeah. I will refrain from commenting further, though, because obviously I have too much advanced knowledge on, but although some of that could turn out to be wrong. I mean, that's one thing I always say is that, yes, I want it to stick to the books, but I like it when they do good things that aren't in the books, because I want to have different. I don't want 2 identical stories, you know? Like having different versions is pretty fun. Anyway, Books Immersed says, do you have plans for a potential Dragons and Their Riders breakdown episode later in the off-season? I've thought about doing something like that, and it would make sense to do that. So it's a good suggestion. We'll certainly consider it, especially since it's something I've considered before. But in general, the best way to suggest episodes for us is we have a lot of polls on our Patreon that we have you guys participate in. We drop a lot of topics and y'all pick the ones you like the best. So that's often how some of our episodes get made. So I think if we were to do some polling on some Hot D related topics later in the year, that this would be one of the ones that would be on such a poll. So maybe your time to sign up and join so you can participate in such voting. Otherwise, we'll still make episodes regardless. Okay, so let's talk, before we get back, talk about the Blacks and their similar setup that we just did with the Greens. Let's describe our overall thoughts on the season. I know some of this we've said already, but I want to kind of focus on that for a minute or two here for each of us. So Sean, again, I will start with you. Give us your overall thoughts on the season. Maybe compare a little bit to season 1 and maybe to what you expect for the future, maybe how you think it's going to fit in the long term, and whatever else you want to say. Fire away.
I loved it. I loved the first season and this season. I would have a hard time picking one over the other. I think that this season, I will say last season, probably the biggest action sequence I can remember anyway was Daemon on the Stepstones, and I found myself kind of rolling my eyes at that. Whereas this one was the dragon battle scene, which I was just completely enthralled with. So from an action perspective, which, a lot of people are frustrated with how little there is, but I am not. I'm totally satisfied. And I overall like the action from this season better than last season, I think. I do like that last season, but, just having a couple extra episodes, you got to fill in a little more backstory. And even with the time jumps, I was totally fine with those time jumps. I think the stuff that went on in between those time jumps probably would not have been enough to fill interesting episodes. It would have been like little plot lines that would have to come and go. It's hard to connect what happens between age 15 and 17 that doesn't have world implications into the main storyline. It makes sense to me how they manage that, but this season didn't seem to have much need for time jumps. And if anything, I appreciate they kind of spent a lot of time on certain aspects, which was mostly, character development and maybe some world building. I mean, I feel like I've said a million different things in the details, but for a sort of an overview, I'm just blown away with the production. There have been a few moments this season where I had to kind of like, think how I could justify something like, the idea of the queen sneaking around. But I think I can find ways in my mind to imagine how that would play out. I think if they had given us 20 minutes worth of like negotiations and subterfuge and sneaking through tunnels and some spy character, I think they could have set that up in a way that we would have swallowed more easily. And given that, I can swallow it easily. And it's worth it because I think those interactions were great. I love this sort of journey, the sort of mystical journey that Damon went through, and I believe the results of it, if you will. Like I'm more sold on his commitment to Rhaenyra and his regrets for mistake that he's made in the past. He was a character I was really frustrated with the first season. This season, arguably he might be less entertaining. For me at least, there might be a little less love to hate part of him.
Yeah,
but there might be
disliking him is part of the fun. Yeah,
right. Yeah, I might support him a little bit more. And some of the characters, I'm almost afraid for what's going to happen to Kristen Cole. Not just afraid for his life, but afraid for like how broken of a person he's going to become. Alicent, the same thing. I don't know. I feel like I've heard some people say nothing happened this season. Like, what show are you watching? Like, I can't.
That's a take I really don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, to list all the things that have happened. It's crazy how much has happened. Like the shifts in power and power dynamics and the roles that people have, and the overall, like in the beginning, feeling like, how can the Blacks possibly win? I just kept ringing in my ear when Otto said, Aegon has every symbol of power is in our hands, right? And now, not so much.
Yeah, except for the dragons.
Yeah, you may even maybe the counterpoint is when Cersei told Littlefinger, power is power. All of a sudden she has all these dragons. Like, we don't care what sword you're carrying or who put the crown on your head. You can't do anything about our dragons now. Yep. There's a little bit of that, which makes it harder for me to think how it's going to go to 4 seasons, which makes me realize, how much more could happen with all these different characters. And if you just want to see who wins the battle, you probably don't need to watch like 2 episodes. But if you want to understand the people who went through these battles and why and how it affected them, then that's what this whole show is for. And I love it. I love 99.9% of it.
Well said, Sean. Thanks for that. That's really good. I appreciate that. Shaya, what about you? What are your takes here?
I agree with a lot of what Sean said, and I like looking at it in context of season 1, and I like trying to think about how it will be in context of the whole show. And it's hard to say for some things. The jury is still out. Things that didn't resonate hard for me. I still have hopes that, for example, even though I got comical that Rhaena still had not actually become Nettles and tamed Sheepstaler by the end. Like, I found that amusing pacing wise. But by the time the show ends and I've seen that arc play out, I might look at that much differently, I'd like to think. You know what I mean? And I think, and comparing it to season 1, I am happy to not just have time jumps and changing actors, and I'm happy to be settled with the cast and characters that we have now. So I think I liked season 2 more than season 1 in a lot of ways. I think maybe my complaints about season 2 were like, I think the things I disliked in season 2, I disliked more in season 2 than in season 1. Yet I still liked season 2 more. I would say. And again, that does, a lot of that really does come down to how they're handling some of the Dragon Seed plotline stuff. And that isn't just about the Nettles, Rhaena stuff, because I do think it would have been more effective if we had been following some red herrings, red dragon. I think if we had been following some dragon seeds that didn't get a dragon, I think it would have been a more effective episode. So that comes down to pacing, what characters they feature. I would like to see even more small folk. I saw in the chat people talked about how they felt that this show really kind of focuses more on the main 3 and doesn't let the show be the ensemble cast that it really is. And I felt that. There were moments with, Bela, for example, who got a strong scene with Corlys, but who I still regularly felt like she was kind of just there in the background, gassing up people. She was gassing up Jace and Corlys both. I didn't really feel that it was about Bela as much. And I don't know. I found some disappointments with certain characters that I was really excited to dig into. Bela and Rhaena both, Helena, all of the kid generation, and I don't know. I felt that they still felt that they had to focus on Rhaenyra, Alicent, Daemon, and I don't think they really had to. I think they felt they had to. And I don't know. Maybe I was more negative than I meant to. My point is, I like this season more than season 1. I had higher hopes for how they would handle certain characters, but I was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked how they handled other things.
I think you would maybe summarize some of that by saying it had higher highs and lower lows.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you describe it.
Yeah, that's it. Higher
Feels
high
like
and
how you
lower lows
it.
for me. But I still agree with Sean. I liked the action in this season far more than the action in season 1.
Yeah, Rook's Rest was better than anything in season 1 as far as battle. Like Sean said, yeah, the Stepstones battle wasn't anywhere near as cool as Rook's Rest. I would agree with a lot of what y'all said. I will be more critical when we do a book to show episode, which is next week. So when we talk about adaptational changes, you'll see me with a lot more criticisms of particular details. But I'm giving my thoughts as a whole, and I'm trying not to judge it by the book at all. I want to separate that concept. I want to judge the show as a standalone thing and separately judge it as an adaptation. I don't want those things to be contained in one analysis. So I think those things are best left separate. So yeah, strengths of season 1 that season 2 didn't have are it's a little clearer storyline. Paddy Considine's presence was missed a little bit. He was such a strong part of season 1. Only having a little bit of him in season 2 was like, oh, well, they lost an important character. It's a big deal when you lose a major actor that was just doing so well. Obviously, we knew that was happening. He was dead. So it wasn't like, oh my God, where's Paddy Considine? And I would also agree with the way I summarized Ashaya's point would also describe how I feel about it. I think it did have higher highs and lower lows. Yeah, I think some of the weaker moments of the entire show were this season. Certainly the fact that it was shorter is a negative. It's not a good thing, right? Having 2 fewer episodes isn't good. But yeah, the timeline's a lot easier to follow, even though they probably took a few liberties with distance and travel times.
Healing time is what I think of with Aegon's healing.
Aegon is healing kind of fast, sure. It's that Targaryen blood, right? Yeah, that's what it's all about.
He's built different.
So they don't, and not having time jumps was a really difficult thing to have to manage, and they did it really well, but just not having to do time jumps is just kind of better, right? So I do appreciate that, and I think that it's hard to judge. Like, we can judge season 1 more now that we have season 2 because we saw what it set up. So it's hard to fully judge season 2 without season 3 to see what events it actually set up. If it pays those off really well, season 2 is going to look better in retrospect. And if season 3 is kind of a bummer, it'll make season 2 look even worse in retrospect too. So I think these things are a little bit tied to each other, especially when they specifically are setting up the next season, which both of these did. And of course, every season sets up the next season. That's always how it goes. But this season particularly has a lot of setup. And so a lot of that needs to be weighted on to see how the payoff comes. Okay, let's move on to a few houses and powers that are undeclared, meaning they aren't on either side right now, and that is potentially important. Like, Sean, you brought up the possibility of other plot lines, some other players that might shift the big picture. And this is where some of that could potentially come from. We have Dalton Greyjoy. He's been name dropped several times throughout both season 1 and season 2. So far, no movement on that. The Velaryons talk about kind of expecting to maybe have to fight them, but that's not a sure thing. They haven't declared. He's the Red Kraken. He's not the Black Kraken. He's not the Green Kraken. His color doesn't give any indication of what side he's on. I am going to dress up as the Red Kraken for DragonCon in a few weeks, so we'll hopefully soon have some pictures of me covered in blood, and I've got a Greyjoy shield and all that. So
fake blood.
No, it'll be real blood. Shh. So we'll see about that. That's a big player. Obviously, Greyjoys are like, navies don't do well with ships. I mean, with dragons, navies don't do well with ships. No, that's exactly what they are. They are ships. They can't do well without ships. Dragons and that's the problem for them. But there's so many ships, and both sides have dragons, so it's not necessarily as big as a deterrent as it could be. The Tyrells. Oh yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I will say ships, much like dragons, not as much like dragons, but more so than navies. Armies. They can be in multiple places at once. You know, if you split the ships up into like little I don't know, if you have like 100-ship army, you could have 10 different ships at 10 different cities, and you can't get dragons to all those cities all at once, so it can be a problematic distraction in the war efforts.
That's true. And we also saw how moving at night can be one way to evade potential problems with dragons. So maybe that could be adopted. The Tyrells, they are green and gold. It seems like they'd be a perfect match for Aegon's green and gold Hightower / Targaryen sigil, but they're not. And yet they're not. So we hear that. Remember when Otto leaves, he's like, I'll go to Old Town, get our business together there. And Alicent's like, go to Highgarden. They're in charge of the Reach. If you can go to them and use their power to leverage control over the Reach, that could pay off more. Kind of like what Daemon did by going to the Tullys, although he didn't directly go to the Tullys. But still, that's how it worked out. It went through the
Daemon
Tullys.
Attempted to do.
Yeah. Something like that is what Otto was maybe trying to do before... Who knows? Before he got captured, it might even be the Tyrells that put him in prison. That's one of the options. They're just like, no, we're going to stay neutral, and in order to stay neutral, we're going to throw you in jail and just.
We do have a poll going in our Facebook group. If you're in our Facebook group, please go vote on Otto, and you could, if you think it's the Tyrells, you could vote for them.
I think I mentioned this at least a little bit last episode, but I'm still thinking about it now. Because someone in one of the comments, I think, suspected that maybe Massaria had Otto, which I hadn't considered that, and I think that is a good consideration. But her, much like the Tyrells and almost all these other people that are suggested, like, why would they keep it secret? Why would Massaria not tell, hey, Rhaenyra, I got Otto. We can use him as a hostage, as leverage. We can get information from him. Like, whoever
that's
has
why I
him,
think
it doesn't
it
make
can't
sense
be
that they
Massaria
wouldn't-
to me.
Massaria would kill him.
Yeah.
She hates him.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Like, maybe-
probably.
Maybe someone has captured him on her behalf and is bringing him to her so she can be the one. That still seems a
could see
little
that.
convoluted. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like whoever's got him has got to have a reason for keeping it secret.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
what makes it
only
hard
think
to figure.
Loras.
But I still can't think of what Larys thinks Otto will do if you've kept him there is a flaw in that. I still lean Larys, but I feel about even about Larys and Beesbury's, but it's not really the scope of what we're saying right now. But regardless, go vote and give us your opinion.
Yeah, let's move on. We've already got a place for people to weigh in on that. So the Arbor is another one that's kind of like, I wonder why the Arbor isn't involved. They typically have a large fleet, but their fleet wasn't involved in Fire and Blood either. So they might just be following George's lead on that. George has never given an explanation for why the Arbor fleet wasn't involved. It's not hard to imagine there is one. Like they could have had some sort of catastrophe recently that threw off their ability. They might just be like, we are not getting involved. They're just like aggressive neutrality. Come make us join your war. We're an island off the southwest coast. If you want to come make us join, do it. But until you come force us, we are going to sit here and do nothing. And if you ravage us, that's going to have an impact on the wine supply for this country. So don't just think about who you're affecting. That's their real, like, if you mess with us, you mess with the wine. So like that's they've got that weapon to hold out. The Bravos. Bravos is no ally of the Triarchy. In fact, they're an enemy of the Triarchy. And they have a big navy. They're the leader of Bravos is called the Sea Lord. They always have a big navy. So that is a potential player.
That's where Larry said he was going to go with Aegon, yeah?
Yes, it is. Very true. Volantis, ditto, also not an ally of the Triarchy, also has a big navy, farther away, less likely to be involved, but definitely potential. Absolutely. Norvos, Qohor, and Lorath, those are the other free cities. The rest have all been either mentioned or they're part of the Triarchy. Unlikely to matter, but you never know, I guess. Qohor and Norvos are inland. They don't get involved with this naval stuff. Lorath is tiny and poor. They're not likely to matter, but technically they're worth a mention. As I said before, Dorne, right? Dorne is independent. Their book version, Prince Corran, is like, we are not getting involved in this. Y'all both have dragons. We're done. We don't want to join either side. Last time dragons came to our realm, y'all burned a bunch of our castles like repeatedly. Aegon and Visenya did that, then Rhaenys before. We'd rather just stay out of it. Now, it would be a small change for them to tweak things because his daughter, Princess Alejandra, when she takes over, she starts raiding the realm. She's like, here's our chance. Like the realm has been weakened. So they could start that early. They could have that. They could just tweak the timeline a little. And this interesting Dornish character gets involved. So that's a possibility. Now, Also, the reason Dorne didn't join either side was, well, the Dornish typically hate the Greens anyway. They hate the Reachmen, the Tyrells, the High Old Town. That's who they're usually against. But they were opposed to the Blacks in the recent War of the Stepstones. Dorne was the ally of the Triarchy against Daemon and Corlys. So they've got bad blood for both sides. So anyway, worth a mention, but decent chance nothing much comes of it. Let's talk about the Blacks characters. Rhaenyra. Huge turn for her. She starts off in grief, having a falling out with Daemon, sending her children away because she's worried about being able to protect them, feeling lonely, isolated, and thinking she can't win, to everything works out seemingly at the end. Daemon bends the knee to her after prophecy? Like, to her, that's got to be like, wow, of all the things that turned him around, dreams and prophecy.
Well, I guess she kind of, it's implied. Like, I he doesn't really get into the details, but I guess you're right.
He said, I saw it. I saw.
Yeah, it's just like, I would have a lot of questions.
She's like, you're talking like my father. He's like,
yeah, I would like to see them talk about this more. Like, I would like to see the continuation of like him explain this to her. Anyway, they won't do it, but I'm super curious.
Yeah, it would have been weird for them to have a conversation in front of the whole army like that. They already spoke High Valyrian to keep it a little bit secret. But yeah, I do want to see further conversations there. But it's such a dramatic turnaround for her. She's like, I'm going to lose. I'm alone. All of a sudden, Daemon's back with her. She's got Mazzaria. She's got Mazzaria's network in terms of what that does for her politically and powerfully. Dragon Siege, she's got new dragons. She's got a navy already. That was the one thing she had already. But even that's stronger than it was at the beginning of the season. And her vision for the prophecy is a little clearer now because she thinks she can win now. She's got all her thing. It's a humongous turnaround, and it's starting to go the wrong direction. Like, it not only does it turns around so well that it begins to make her maybe a little overconfident. Is not the right word. We use the term God complex, that she's getting a little too sure of herself, a little too feeling that what she's doing is destined, and nothing she can do is wrong because she's the one with the prophecy. She's got the whole realm dies if she isn't successful. Like, she can frame it that way and not be entirely wrong, but also you can see how that would, that's pretty hard. That's a pretty big thing to have on your shoulders. You might it'll mess with the person, right, Sean?
Yeah, it might be enough. Like right now, I think, or maybe even we could see that Daemon burns some town down. She doesn't go out and burn some town down, but she might start to. She might start to feel like, well, that's what I have to do, or that's what he's doing, I can do it, or he started it, or it's part of my destiny, or whatever it takes. There might be some justification for unnecessary violence. Already, I think it's a little hopeful of me to hope that they use the dragons in ways that do more message sending and military damage than innocent civilian killing. I think I might be a little naive in hoping for that in the first place, but I'm worried there's going to be even more than I would have thought the way it's going now.
Right on. So turning to Daemon, who we are going to do a full episode on him separately. So just the bullet points, he goes from wanting to just do something, his first instinct was to take Rhaenys and go attack Vhagar to take out the key strategic obstacle that they're facing in the large dragon on the other side. If they can take out Vhagar, then they have the advantage right away without dragon seeds or any of the other things that came later. But of course that doesn't happen. Then Blood and Cheese happens, and this backfires in a number of ways. One of them being that it makes Aemond even more full of himself, which maybe isn't backfiring for the Blacks, but it's certainly an interesting side effect. He's like, oh, they're afraid to face me. They're assassinating me instead. Like, it's not exactly what happened there, Aemond. So he goes to Harrenhal, and one of the first things that happens is Alice Rivers like, you will die here. And then he has a vision at the end of the season showing his own death that seems to be related to his presence there or directly connected to it. So he goes from ambitious and selfish and angry to pretty dedicated and seemingly focused on the long term and willing to die for the cause. That is a gigantic turnaround. Like, nothing happened to Daemon at Harrenhal. Right? I think it's pretty huge. Like, this is a guy that choked Rhaenyra at the barest mention of prophecy. She barely starts talking about it and he chokes her. He yells drivel at Alice Rivers when she's talking about curses and dreams, but then when she's leading him to the heart tree in episode 8, he's like, you don't scoff, and he says, I am no longer inclined to. Like in a calm, even voice, like devoid of pride, even though he's admitting he was wrong. It's just he's still keeping a little of his royal bearing while admitting that he was completely wrong. So that's a huge turnaround, too. That is a character, perhaps more than anyone else, that changed. I think he maybe changed the most of anyone, but the one argument against that is that change came right at the end, and it hasn't fully played out. Like, maybe he's just saying things. Maybe he's going to backslide. How convinced is he really? I think he feels, it seems pretty legit, but to be fair, we haven't seen his behavior much farther past this moment.
I mean, he can be convinced of all of these things and still think when it comes down to it that his opinion on some matter later is more correct.
That's true.
His assessment of some military situation is more. Yeah, I still don't think that means he won't still have some stubbornness or streak of pride or anything. Like, he just will. He supports Rhaenyra, but I don't know.
I also think the change came in the 7th episode, and we're already seeing it play out in the 8th episode.
You're right. You're right.
I think it was because of the change that came about in the 7th one that he was able to accept the prophecy.
Yes.
And that he was willing to kneel to Rhaenyra. I think the kneeling to Rhaenyra is a result of the change that has already happened in him.
I fully agree, and that's why I wanted to set aside an episode for it, because yes, there's multiple things. Like, multiple things had to fall in place. Like, he couldn't accept the prophecy without accepting supernatural. He couldn't accept the supernatural without evidence of that, and he couldn't follow Rhaenyra without believing in the prophecy, which he couldn't accept. Yeah, you can see why there's a lot to it. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. Jace is a very interesting spot. Does a great job with negotiations and diplomacy. Shows himself to be pretty skilled at that, maybe even talented at it. But still ends up kind of shut out by the end. He feels shut out. He's got some SDE, small dragon energy, but has legitimate concerns about his place in the succession. He's still, you could say his arc goes from heir to still heir, but feeling less secure in that position, even though no one's directly challenging him for it. It's the reasons he felt secure in that position have changed. The world around them has changed. Like, he still has the same dragon. He's still Rhaenyra's firstborn child, but the things that he thought made him special aren't as special anymore. And the last we saw, Rhaenyra flew off to confront Daemon, and he, as we talked about at the time, it made sense for her to bring Sea Smoke instead of Jace for a number of reasons. But a recurring kind of flaw with Rhaenyra is, and this goes to her god complex thing, I think, is she doesn't really explain herself to subordinates very well. It's a problem that we saw with Jon Snow, I think, that he wasn't very good at explaining why his decisions were what they were, which we readers get. We're in his head, or we understand, we have the time to think about it. Same goes for Jace and Rhaenyra, but we also see that, communicate with your subordinates better.
Sometimes I can't tell whether I think that's a writing flaw or a character flaw. That's one of those ones where, I try to point that out, that when I criticize something, sometimes I think, it's valid for the writers to write this, it's believable, but I find it to be a character flaw. In the case of Jon Snow, I maybe was more of a writing flaw in my eyes. In this case, I think it is meant to be more of a character flaw, because we see the way that Jay seethes over it. We see the way that it plays out. So I'm inclined to think that the writers would say, yes, this is a flaw that she has. I don't know that I thought that in Game of Thrones of Jon Snow. I kind of felt like that just kind of got that swept under the wasn't important to them. I don't know.
It wasn't a show thing for Jon. I think it was a book thing. Yeah, like his relationship with the other commanders on the wall, that he didn't explain his decisions very well. I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know that was a show problem. Just a book
okay,
thing.
Cool. I was like, I couldn't quite remember that, but yeah. Anyways, my point. I don't think we think that they. I think it's good TV, I guess. It's good drama for Jace. I think it's a believable conflict for a son to have with a mother. It's believable for an heir to have with the ruler. I think there's
for
a lot of levels.
In this setting,
bastards in this setting. There's a lot of levels to where I'm happy to see this play out. It makes me unhappy in that I hate to see Rhaenyra look so bad to me, because I like the character, but I don't like Rhaenyra in this context. I don't like her as a ruling mother. It's when those roles get muddied for her. I feel that
she goes to queen and not to
Yeah.
mother. Like, we talked a
Yeah.
lot about the duality of that, how Alicent is now focused on mother because she's no longer the queen, and it's making her a better mother. But Rhaenyra is going the other way. She's becoming less of a mother, more of a queen, and part of that is her children have been sent away, so she's not constantly reminded about them. She's only has Jace around, who is also the crown prince.
Better mother to Helena, I would say, for Alicent.
Keep in mind, she's still making failures as queen too, because it is important for her as a mother to keep Jace informed of what's going on, but also as a queen to keep Jace and the council informed. And that wasn't the first time when she just went off and did something, or to give credit to the writers for making a mistake that she's making. The council addresses it too. Remember, they're like, they looked at Corlys and like, what do we do? And he's like, let's see what she has to say first. Like, he doesn't know what to do. You know, like, she often is making these decisions and going off and doing things without letting people know. And other people, like Rob, made that mistake too. He had this big master battle plan that Edmure ruined, quote unquote ruined, because Edmure didn't know the big master battle plan because Rob didn't tell him. And every now and then, some of these decisions, you can see that maybe they don't want to tell the subordinates because maybe they don't think they'll be able to convince them and they don't want to be argued out of it. Or maybe they need to keep it secret or something.
The secret one, yeah.
Maybe that's a reason to not announce it to the whole council at once, but geez, pull Jace aside and let him know, right? Or maybe leave instructions, say, you know, don't open this till tomorrow at 3 and then leave, and then they can find out what's going on. So they don't, because in a lot of these scenarios too, she just kind of got lucky. It worked out. What if she had gotten intercepted by Vhagar, or got hit by a stray arrow, or just Daemon needed her there, or some internal struggle? Like, it's all kinds of things that might have kept her from going back, and people would not know. It's the same thing she's mad at Daemon for, is not letting her know what's going on. She's doing the same thing. So I think it's definitely a mistake that she's making, and I think the show seems to be doing it intentionally, not a writing error. So.
Right on. Yeah, I agree. Well said, y'all. Great takes on Jace there. Baela. She does not have small dragon energy, even though she does have a small dragon. She shows herself to be someone that handles adversity pretty well. Like someone that the bumps in the road occur and she has the right attitude about how to face them.
She's also just kind of gotten everything in life, I think Rhaena would say, her sister, you know.
There is a little of that, probably, too.
She hasn't faced, I mean, she's had her mother's, I don't know, she's had some, her life has been easier for having her dragon and her betrothed of the crown prince, is all I'll say. Like, compared to Rhaena, Baela has a pretty sweet life.
She's had a mirror image that she can see, I'm glad I didn't get that outcome.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm the lucky one. I got the dragon. I'm born first. I'm married to the crown prince. Not that these things will all necessarily go well in the end, but yeah, she can look at her situation and go, my sister got the short end of the stick on multiple reasons, whereas Jace he doesn't have that comparison. His brother died, so yeah, that's worse, but they're not twins. That's years apart. He was never the heir or close in the first place. So yeah, so Baela, it shows that her ability to handle these things, take these things in stride, is something she's also able to communicate to other members of her faction and kind of get them back in the saddle, so to speak. She does it with Corlys. She's a big part of his turn, and she does it with Jace, which is perhaps in some ways more important and more personal because they have a more personal connection, but is also just beginning to play out. So I would argue that Baela is Rhaenyra's most consistent and least problematic ally to this point. The one that Rhaenyra never seems to have any trouble with her, no back talk, no disobedience other than maybe getting a little closer to the Kristen than she said she would, which is, there's a little of that in there. But she's sidelined because she doesn't have a bigger dragon and doesn't complain like, oh, why didn't she take me? Well, because your dragon is small. It's as simple as that, So good character.
She's kind of sidelined because she's so good. Like she is so competent and not causing trouble that like there's not a ton of drama. So like I'm glad they gave her that Corlys scene, and she did talk and speak to herself. I don't want to I think I was maybe too harsh on that Corlys Baela scene because it was for the benefit of Corlys and Rhaenyra, but it was a good Baela scene regardless. But, it wasn't,
Yeah,
my
shined.
point is it wasn't as much about Baela, the scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was about what she brings to the table, less about what she is. It's like, this is her skill. This is a skill she has of bringing Corlys back, negotiating him and saying all the right things. But it was more about him, like his role in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, she still said her thing. I'm fire and blood. It's like, again, I don't think the Bechdel test is really like an accurate or appropriate test here, and it would have passed that even because it was still like talking about other things, but it still had this. It didn't satisfy me as someone who just wants to see Bela be Bela and have like a Bela-centric scene. Like any scene is really like, this was the Corlys scene, this was the Jace scene, and Bela was there in a major part to me.
I can sort of see that. I don't fully agree with you because it's a matter of, it's just like, how do you categorize a scene? Like the scene, it definitely has more, like the plot-wise, those scenes were more about Jace and Corlys, but character-wise, they were more about Bela. Like she said more. She had way more dialogue in those scenes. Way more acting.
Yeah, she had a great monologue.
Yeah.
Great monologue. Great acting.
So that's where I would maybe quibble a little bit with that distinction, but I don't fully disagree. Obviously, I mostly agree. Rhaena, her sister, of course, from the person getting the short end of the stick to possibly a bigger dragon than her sister, which puts her in front of her in terms of like how she might get used in a war situation. Like, well, I can't send Moondancer into battle unless it's really desperate. But this dragon, assuming it's tamed and controllable, which is a big assumption, but if that happens, then this is a much more valuable asset to the war than Moondancer. And all of a sudden, Rhaena would leap dragon, her sister, which could create some very interesting character moments between them, in addition to having an impact on the war, giving them another dragon, if it's like, wow, another dragon. Wow, jeez.
So far, the way they presented Bela, she should be understanding and supportive of that. But
we'll see. We'll see if her letting, adversity just rolls off her. We'll see if that continues, given this scenario. This would be a little more personal, and having her younger sister leap dragon her, might change that. But maybe not. Mysaria, big change for her as well. Less about who she is and more about her fortunes changing dramatically. She's a refugee because her place of business was just burned. She lost everything to Masters of Whispers for the Queen, who's grateful for saving her life, and now a possible lover as well, which just, again, we're not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that by itself has all sorts of ramifications. This is the lover to someone who believes she's the ordained follower of the prophecy, carrier of the prophecy, a prophecy Mysaria doesn't even know about. Like, oh boy, that's a lot. There's a lot there. So, well, that's fraught with potential that is untapped. Corlys, a lot of recent losses, and mostly going back to last season, losing his daughter, losing his son, then losing Rhaenys. The ultimate loss, that he felt that way more. And like we said with Bela, he steps up to be the hand after she helps him frame what it would mean to continue her work. He didn't see it that way. And this was a big change for him. This is someone a little bit like, it's a micro version of Daemon. He's accused multiple times of making things about himself. He says that later. He admits to it in episode 8. And there's ample evidence of that with his 2 bastard sons that he has had very little to do with his entire life, which is a sign of selfishness there too. So this is a guy who goes from being all kind of about himself, a man that when he gets sad, he'll go flee and go take ship when his whole family is hurting, but he makes it about himself. So this is a guy that also has turned. He's realized some of those mistakes seemingly, and his confrontation from his son happens right as he's sailing out to join the blockade. So from managing the blockade to joining it, so it remains to be seen and how this will all play out. But he's had a major change of who he is too, I think. We haven't yet seen how that will affect his behavior, if he even survives the battle to have a change. But I think he's a different man now. Is that how you kind of see it too, Sean? Or
I mean, he just has to be. He's lost his son and his daughter and his wife. Like, how can you not change as a person?
Yeah.
So, and I think for the better. I think that I'm not sure quite how well the show will portray this, but I feel like that scene. I think they had that scene with Alan for a reason, and I think that might cause Corlys to focus who the new him is. Does that make sense? He's probably like a little lost, and maybe becoming hand gives him some sort of focus. A lot of times people kind of bury themselves in their work where they're dealing with some struggle in life. which might keep you from really changing, right? Or maybe it'll make you change in a way you didn't intend to. Just momentum of your job will carry you in a new direction. But I think that conversation with Alan is going to pull some strings in him one way or the other.
Well said. Yeah, nice and succinct there. And speaking of Alan, this is a guy we meet who's highly capable, very bitter for good reasons, and he gets a chance to finally vent about that at the end of the season. So I'm not sure that we saw a large shift in his character, certainly his outlook, certainly his place in the scheme of things has really jumped up, and who knows what's going to happen in terms of his heritage going forward and his view of his brother and their relationship. But it's more of a potential for a lot of change for his character than actual change. Like, this character is, we just got to know him this season. He's a new character for us, and he's developing. Adam, kind of similar, but different.
I want to say real quick, Alan, simply saying those things out loud to Corlys, that might be enough to change him too. That might release some of the bitterness. He's probably had those thoughts in him his whole life and never told anyone. And so to finally not only tell someone, but tell the person that he wanted to tell it to, it's probably somewhat of a burden off of him, and opens a door for him to move forward in a new way toward a new thing.
That's very well said. I think it's a very good point. Adam didn't quite have the level of bitterness. He's just more disappointed, definitely hurt, definitely struggled, but he doesn't hate their father nearly as much. He does want his attention. He does want his acknowledgement, which could be something to consider as to what kind of dragon rider he'll be. Is he going to be trying to prove himself? Is he going to try to earn his father's love and respect? Or is he going to be his own man? Or something in between? We'll see. He has one of the largest rises of all, but we haven't really had enough time with him yet because his dragon riding is new to see how this affects him as a person. We got introduced to him. He's had a humongous rise of power, but not only has it not had a chance to play out, but he hasn't even been in a battle yet, and that's another thing that would really have a big impact on him as well, you would think. A shipwright flying a dragon into battle and doing whatever that means, burning people or ships or armies or whatever, that'll have an effect on you too, wouldn't it?
Once again, I'm not sure if it's something a show would or could portray, but I think just him flying around Harrenhal, sort of on guard, if you will, when Rhaenyra is talking to Daemon, I think that would have an impact on him. Just seeing all those soldiers on the ground, just thinking about what my dragon can do. My dragon could kill all those men, and I might have to if it's a bad guy army, or a bad guy dragon could kill all those men, and I might have to defend against that. Some of the reality, what he might have to do as a dragon rider might have come into focus on that little adventure with Rhaenyra.
That's true. You think about the level of devastation that's possible, but you also think about the level of responsibility for somebody that wants to protect against that. What kind of danger would he put himself in or not? If he's afraid or unable to, maybe not afraid is the right word, but just unable to be brave enough.
I think he is thinking about that already, because we see that conversation between him and Ulf where he says we'll see who's going to be a coward or not, right?
Yeah, he says it. You're right. That's good, perfect foreshadowing. There's plenty of time for us to see who the coward will be. It might be neither of them. It might be both of them. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, it's just funny because, he says that. It might be this perfect bit of irony because Adam is a coward, as it turns out. I get a good vibe from Adam. But, it is a good point that you could turn it around.
Turns out he's afraid of heights. It's oh my God, I'm so not cut out for this.
I actually would really like to see Ulf in particular, but Ulf or Hugh have some kind of PTSD and trauma from the Red Sowing. Because Ulf, I pointed out how Ulf was all scared of the torch for a moment. He just got startled, and he's oh fuck. Yeah, I would like to see him a little bit more scared or edgy about it all than the average dragon rider among them, Ulf and Hugh specifically.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Ulf briefly. Talk about another large rise, a more unlikely rise perhaps than even Adam's. Talk about stories coming to life. This is something out of a story, drunken drawler to drunken dragon rider. How does that even happen? Well, we saw how it happened. It was pretty awesome. Pretty cool. A great story. It was compelling and fun and unusual.
A better story
but it's just getting started.
Saw it.
It's a better story than Ulf.
No one. I mean, he's a better storyteller than most people. He's a certified yapper.
Better than Bran.
He has the gift of gab. Yeah.
He's not a poor communicator.
I mean, he's a communicator, but he's a poor communicator. He's literally poor, Aziz.
Got me there.
Yeah, he literally
you got me there.
But also, I wouldn't call his communication to Jace effective.
He's not very good at reading the room.
Yeah, not very good at that, but he sure is entertaining.
We caught a great joke, by the way, Sean. I'm writing the breakdown for episode 8, and I thought I'd share this with you all while we have a minute. It's Ulf telling Jace, "We're cut from the same cloth." And then later, when they're getting dressed, he's pretty much wearing the same outfit as Jace. So he's like literally
That's
cut
true.
from. It's like this is cut from the same cloth. Yeah. So
Which
Yeah,
also
didn't,
points to him not wanting to be as much in combat. He's not in the armor. He's in a doublet tunic.
he's more like Aemon. Yeah, Aemon doesn't wear armor
he's,
either.
He's in the Jace, the Aemon fit. They don't wear armor, but Adam and Hugh get armor.
Yeah, Adam and Hugh were pretty much all in black, and Jace and Ulf are in black and red, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And Hugh, with his hidden heritage surprise, well, except for the hair. It wasn't that hidden, though, right? Like, even Sean, like, you're the one, you didn't read the book, and you're like, that guy looks Targaryen. Like, yeah, you're right. So it wasn't that hidden. The surprise was the specific connection to Sarah Targaryen, which was like, that was really cool for us book readers. It was a great reveal. I like that. It fit pretty well with what was already laid out in Fire and Blood. So he goes from desperate, starving family man to Dragon Rider family man. What a change. Big difference, like from pauper to power. Unfortunately, it didn't come before he could save his child. Eating nothing to eating whatever he wants, little birds or no. And so far, he hasn't even, like, seemingly communicated with his wife. That's like, are they going to get to talk? Is he going to somehow be able to... How's he going to get a message to her? Where is she? Did she go to Tumbleton? Send this message to Tumbleton for Cat? Yeah. Like, how do they deliver that to her? Like, I don't know how that's going to play out. But certainly the fact that he's married matters. Ulf doesn't really have Ulf's drinking buddies. That doesn't really matter that much. I'm sure he wants to see them and show off, but that's not some great conflict building there. And Adam with his brother and father, that's very interesting. Hugh's got a wife, but it's harder to see how that will play out or even logistically come to bear. Like, do you have any thoughts on that, Sean?
Mostly my thoughts are around the idea of her being an innocent person. She's just this, faceless part of the mass that he might burn in some other city. I wonder if he'll have any sort of empathy as just a citizen in a town that might get burned by a dragon, and he's going to go to some town and burn the citizens with his dragon. I don't know
I think we see
if that will hold him back from doing it, or...
I was happy in that finale scene when he's talking. It's Hugh and Bela that bulk, right? Like, of the dragon seeds, though I'm sure the others weren't into the idea, but only to voice their concerns right then, and it is Hugh and Bela.
Yeah, I doubt either of them were happy about it. Like, yeah, let's go burn people. That sounds great. I can't wait. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Those bulks are worth taking note of for sure. Guilty Undertaker says, I did hear a funny comment that Vermithor likes Hugh because he has silver hair, a silver beard, and never listens to his wife's sensible advice. Well, he listened. Jerry's listened to Alysanne sometimes.
I will say on that subject, I did see Kieran. I quoted it in our coverage of the Red Sewing episode, so I won't go too into it. But Kieran Bew had a great interview where he talked a lot about his thoughts on the character of Hugh and his dynamic and his relationship with Vermithor, his relationship with his mother, and grandfather Jaehaerys, and the thing that he brought up that I thought was so brilliant and really spoke to how much he really thought about it was he said that he felt that Hugh and Jaehaerys both felt a lack of control. They wanted to have control over things that they couldn't. That they both even watched one of their daughter die from illness, which is like the ultimate kind of lack of control type of thing, right? Like you just want to save your child and you can't because you can't save them from sickness, right? You feel very powerless despite being someone who has all of this power. Like, you are the king, yet you can't control the things you most want to control. Anyways, I thought that was very astute from Kieran Bew in terms of, I do see that comparison between the two of them. And really in terms of any patriarch, matriarch, any head of a family, head of a household, I think would have those similarities, you know?
Right on. Well said. Sir Simon Strong, another character who finds himself in a very different position, from the quickest bent knee ever to, which was dinner with his family, to countless new structures and repairs on his castle, and from just like a few people at Harrenhal to an army of thousands and the Queen's gratitude and more. This is a pretty big turnaround for this guy who's just like, I can't even keep up with the upkeep with his castle. It's dripping. There's huge, vast piles of bat poop in one of the towers. Like, we're overrun by bat poop. That's how unable we are to keep up with the repairs here. All of a sudden, river lords are there building stuff. Even Daemon's chopping wood and building structures. I mean, yeah, this is a big change for him and his position in the world. He thought he was witnessing treason, calls for Rhaenyra, and it just worked out great because he wasn't planning treason, but it was really good timing for Rhaenyra to show up, as it turns out. So I give him the same little clap he gave at the end there. Just...
I say?
Hey, this is working out great. Yeah.
Someone at our city winery event dressed up in a Simon Strong inspired fit. He had this purple and gold kind of brocade robe. It was real drippy with it.
With
honestly.
Shorts.
Yeah, with shorts. It was quite warm. And I brought him out. I got a big applause, and he was everyone knew that Simon has the great fits.
Purple and gold, really. It's hard to not associate with Simon now, yeah. So this individual called themselves Stephen Strong, which reminds us of our good friend Stephen Stark. Stephen Stark's real name is Stephen Stark. This gentleman's name, it wasn't actually Stephen Strong, but we like that. It fits. It's great. So shout out to you, both of you. Strong and Stark.
Yeah, I hope.
Which, by the way, is the same word in German.
Listening.
I don't know if y'all remember that. The translation of Stark in German is strong. Mm-hmm. So, like Michael Clarfeld tells us that this can be confusing. You're reading about the Strongs when they're the Starks, and then the Strongs are also the Strongs. That's tricky. Alice Rivers we will discuss separately. She's way too big for one episode. That'll be part of our episode with Joe Magician. In 2 weeks, we'll talk Harrenhal. Alice Rivers, that episode is tentatively titled The Old God's Eye. Yes. Play on words, as we are wont to do. There's quite a few other characters on the Blacks that are not quite tier 1, 2, or maybe even tier 3. There's just a longer list of characters that fit here for the Blacks and the Greens. Young Joffrey, young Aegon, young Viserys, these little princelings that are too young to do much. Maester Gerardis, well, we mentioned Orwyle, so we may as well mention Gerardis, right? Lord Celtigar, the guy who got slapped, he's been in and out. He's on the council. Lord Massey, he's around. His daughter, of course, as well, Alinda, very important. Her running Mazaria's propaganda, but we don't have a lot to say about her as a character. Her actions were important, but we don't really know her personality very well.
I think she was a much worse braider than Rhaenyra's current handmaiden, because Rhaenyra's braids have leveled up since Alinda left. Like, I swear to you, if you look before and after, there's a clear line at which she has a new handmaiden, and it cracks me up.
Alinda the Braider is not her nickname. Yes. So we also got Deanna. It was kind of a surprise return from her, but I'm glad they got to sneak her in there with a fitting role going against Aegon. That made a lot of sense going against the Greens. Sylvie as well going against Aemon. The two of them were like, we were each jilted by one of the brothers. Let's get them.
So Sylvie goes into Aemon. Aemon doesn't go into Sylvie. You've made some big statements on what you think their sex life is like, I think.
Oh, yes. Aemon likes being, never mind.
Okay, anyways, moving on.
Moving on, yeah. Speaking of, so Lord Sir Alfred Broom, of course, his role is there. Sir Laurent Marbrand, we got Kingsguard. Like I mentioned, Sir Rickard Thorne for the Greens, and now we're down to just the one recognizable Kingsguard for the Blacks as well, because Eric is gone and Stefan was burned to death.
Rip both Eric and Arik.
Yep.
I mourn you both. You both thought you were, doing the right thing. Like, Arik wasn't just like some evil knight. Like, they were both just doing their best.
And we
Eric
wonder
was
about,
better.
as we just did, we wonder about Kat. Like, where is that going to go with Hugh? Like, she's not really on the black side, but her husband is, so she kind of is by default. It makes more sense to include her on this list than it does to include her with the Greens, that's for sure. And R.I.P. Rhaenys and Meleys, Lord Darkland, and Stefan Darkland. The Darklands really took it on the chin in this season. And Lord Staunton, who was executed at Rook's Rest as well, who
Eric,
died.
as we said.
Yeah. Now here's who the Blacks have on their team apart from their main cast. Let's not forget Stark. They got a marching army there that we saw right at the end. We got Velaryon, of course. They've been on their team for a while. The Lords of the Narrow Sea. Massey and Celtigar and Sharp Point's now not very useful, but there's others. Riverlands, of course, are on their side pretty fully now, but it's interesting to remind ourselves that House Frey's deal with the crown is different than the rest of the Riverlords' deal with, say, Daemon and Rhaenyra, because they got Jace to agree to give them Harrenhal, which that could be sticky later. I don't know how that could play out. Like, it's like, yeah, like, how's that? Yeah.
Can't be much stickier than Tylan giving the stepstones to the Triarchy.
That's also sticky. You're not wrong. That's a very big problem there. Let's not. By the way, I want to remind everybody of Johanna Swan was captured in season 1 by the Triarchy, and they talked about it in, I think, episode 3 on the episode with the stag hunt. And they mention her as a character that was captured and her ransom wasn't paid for. So if you're a book reader, Joanna Swan has a role in the Triarchy going forward. So that's something we'll talk about later, but I wanted to throw that out there because it's easy to miss, but I can't say specifically because of Sean. We can't spoil Sean. Also, Beesbury and Tarly and other Reach Lords who maybe aren't fully committed to the Blacks, but they're definitely against the Greens. So they're basically the enemy of my enemy is my friend type situation. The Aarons committed 15,000 troops to Rhaenyra, but they haven't marched. They weren't seen in that montage of marching, and that's probably because she feels like she got scammed by the lack of dragon protection, which may work itself out with Rhaena or not. So Rhaenyra could really use those 15,000 troops, but they're not currently marching.
That is an interesting thought, by the way. Let's say Rhaena does tame Sheep Stealer. Okay, just stay there in the Vale and protect the Vale. That's what we promised. Just stay there. Don't do anything.
Is that worth the 15,000 troops? Or it's like, nah, you keep your 15,000 troops. This dragon's more valuable. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Would she be willing to do that? Would she obey that command? Do they send Bela to go watch the Vale? Because we need the bigger dragon in combat.
Moondancer would be a little more effective. Yeah, that's an interesting...
going to be like, hey, Aemond, I heard you need a new dragon rider.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Rain Aemond.
You know, Allison switched sides, and now Rhaena's going to jump to the Greens.
Now, the Greens also, or the Blacks also should have Pentos sort of as an ally. They have Prince Reggio, who's a passive ally. He's not like, they haven't asked him for troops or ships or anything like that, but he's guarding their children and their eggs, apparently. So the plot lines. Let's go through the plot lines to remind ourselves of what happened with the Blacks this season. There's the plot line in the north, grieving for Luke. The blockade's been a plot line all season long. Blood and cheese was a pretty big deal. That moved a lot of things around. The Black Council's frustrations were an on and off thing all season long. Not finished either. They're still frustrated with Rhaenyra. The frustrations have changed. Rather than her not doing enough, she's not telling them what she's doing. And they maybe also object to some of the decisions to burn cities, which may or may not actually happen. Harrenhal's plotline, obviously multifaceted. Daemon's character change, big part of it. Tying into the prophecy, big part of it. And of course, winning the Riverlords, big part of it. It was almost like a three-headed plot. Those were the big things there, I think, that you could say, with subplots aplenty, the phrase, the Brackwoods and Brackens. Blackwoods and Brackens, I did it again. Tullys and all that stuff. So there was quite a bit of a lot of things that mixed into that bag there. The Rook's Rest, pretty huge. The response to it, the death of Rhaenys, was a big deal. That kicked off so many other plot lines. Corlys's grief, but also led to the Red Sowing. The Daemon and Rhaenyra and Mysaria love triangle. It's not really a triangle, is it? But it is 3 people. So they can kind of make a triangle. But Mazzari doesn't know about the prophecy, as I said. And Daemon does now. So Daemon and Rhaenyra both know the prophecy, and Mazzari doesn't. But Daemon and Rhaenyra maybe don't have a functioning intimate relationship anymore. Maybe they do, but Mazzari and Rhaenyra seem to. So that whole thing is fraught with possibility, both good and bad. Lady Jane Eyre's hesitation, of course, this has to do with the troops not being employed right now or sent. That's related to that. Sending away the princes, hatchlings, and eggs to Pentos. That probably isn't just they're off on the shelf for now. There's more that could happen with that. That's all sorts of potential there. You mentioned it at the time, Sean. That's putting your eggs in one basket in a different sort of way. Obviously, Rain of Suns for Sheep Stealer still ongoing. Hugh, Ulf, the common folk of King's Landing. Loved having that as a plot line this season. We didn't have hardly any view into the common folk last season. That's one thing I praise about season 2 that season 1 didn't really have. So that's really good. And it wasn't just Hugh and Ulf. It was also Sylvie and Deanna and these gold cloaks, other random folks like Ulf's friends. You know, there was a lot of that.
You know, I hope when, you know, you're asking me my predictions, and maybe I mixed in a little bit of what I thought might happen and what I kind of wanted to happen. I hope next season the entire cast of Our Flag Means Death gets incorporated into the triarchy.
Yes, Sean. We already got Alawande.
Yeah. When they focus on, kind of like we got a little focus on some of the small folk of King's Landing in the midst of all the other grander stuff. I want to get a little focus on one ship in the triarchy in the midst of all the grander stuff, and that ship to be captained by Steed Bonnet. That's
Steed Bonnet, the least fearsome name of all time. Like, your name is Bonnet, and your name is Steed. Like, Steed is something you ride. I know it's spelled differently, but it's not the thing that leads. It's the vehicle.
Oh,
and
he gets ridden in that show.
Yeah, that's true. He does get.
Yeah.
But his name sounds like Horse Hat. Steed Bonnet? I mean, yeah.
Horse hat. That's hilarious. Watch Our Flag Means Death.
Yeah, Our Flag Means Death is great. 2 seasons of excellence. It would be another Game of Thrones actor on House of the Dragon, because Christian Nairn, a.k.a. Hodor, is on Our Flag Means Death. As is Hisdar. You're right. That would be 2. God, I forgot. Yeah, that'd be 2 characters. Hisdar, his dark materials would be on.
He wasn't in that.
No, he wasn't in that. But his name fits really well. Yeah. So the Red Sewing, of course, huge plot line, one of the biggest plot lines of the season, and not only because it's huge in how it obviously affects the plot, but it happened so late in the season that we have yet to actually see what that is. We can just imagine, holy crap, this is gigantic. And one of those effects is Jace's heritage and how it undermines his view of royal privilege and his claim and all that. Speaking of heritage, there's Alan and Adam's heritage. That's a big subplot. Relationship with Corlys, a good kind of family dynamic that's playing itself out. Daemon's plan to march on King's Landing is a strategy that appears to be going well. And then the very surprising end of Alicent's planning to kind of hand over the keys to Rhaenyra, just as Daemon is sort of planning on marching from the other side. So there's all these set up for King's Landing changing hands, which may or may not happen, but if it does, it seems like it would happen pretty early in the season, along with, of course, the potential conflict in the Gullet, which hard to imagine how that wouldn't happen. Both you got a navy there and another navy on the way. Like, what's going to happen to stop that? A hurricane?
Not gonna lie,
that would work, but I doubt that's going to happen.
After their experience in this season, Aegon and Aemon both would be like, "Good luck, Rhaenyra. It's more trouble than it's worth." You know what I like? They just had nothing but trouble with having King's Landing.
Yeah, it's like was it? I think Steve Van Pruyen mentioned in a prior episode the two-sided coin that Illyria points out. There's the crown on one side and a skull on the other, and it's like, yes, to crown her is to kill her. Yes. That certainly, it wasn't good for Dany to win the crown. It wasn't good for, like, Jon Snow recognized it as a danger. It wasn't good for Robb Stark to win the crown. Like, yeah, these monarchs don't do well in general in Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. They usually, like, have tragic endings or violent tragic endings or, yeah. Maybe this will be different this time, but prepare yourself for the worst just in case, I'd say that's my advice,
Sorry, this is a thought that I meant to express earlier. I wondered, ostensibly I'm unsullied, right? But I do still have some meta knowledge. Like I know like King's Landing isn't going to get burned to the ground. I know the Targaryens are going to continue to rule. I had this general idea that this time period was about a civil war. It is interesting to think of someone who's a little more purely unsullied, someone who hasn't seen Game of Thrones at all, and has just started watching this show in the dark, didn't know anything about George Martin or Danny or any of this other stuff. I wonder if they would predict or assume that a tragic war was coming. I wonder if they would feel like things were dragging out and that there needs to be an action scene or a battle scene or something. You know, I wonder if someone who's, and probably this show is mostly like, not mostly like 51%, but probably like 90% plus people who have already at least seen Game of Thrones. Probably not read the books, but seen Game of Thrones. But I wonder how many people are out there who are just watching us in the blind and what their thought. If you happen to be one of our listeners,
I'm curious too.
Please let us know.
More likely is for our listeners to have friends and family that they can regale us with stories about or insights into.
Rather than direct listeners. Yeah, they know listeners.
Yeah, because there certainly are lots of people who have their family or friends.
You're probably right about that. Yeah. Now, our families, for the most part, have read the books and watched the other shows because they're so connected to us that they want to be involved in what we're involved with. But yeah, like Ashaya mentioned, her father having watched it, but it wasn't like his first. Wasn't for his
He'd
first
seen
go
Game
around.
Of Thrones, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he watches lots of. He likes sci-fi and fantasy. I was instilled that interest from my father. But
my mom's read the books. Yeah, she watched the original show. And yeah, they're in. A few questions before we say goodbye. Jordan Ellis Reynolds says, now the three of you have seen 2 seasons worth. We need a favorite dragon check. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think we had this question not too long ago. I don't know that our answers would change, but clearly not everyone heard it. So why not go through it again? I'll go first. Mine's Caraxes. Has nothing to do with Daemon. I just love the long neck, you know, and the sounds that Caraxes makes are very unique and interesting. And I'm a big sound guy like you are, Jordan. So I appreciate Caraxes' unique nature. I think Caraxes is arguably the most unique because of sound and appearance.
I'll say mine. Personality-wise, it's Sea Smoke, based on the scene with Adam. Aesthetic-wise, it's Moondancer, based on them giving the comparison to David Bowie. Moondancer has this little mohawk. Like, those are my 2 answers currently, and I remember what Sean's answer was when we were asked this before, and his answer is dead. So can you give us an alive dragon, Sean? His answer was Melis.
Yeah, I think that I'm torn between 2. One I barely know anything about, but aesthetically, I think Sheepstealer looks awesome, and I imagine Sheepstealer listens to punk music.
Oh.
We'll see what their personality is, or maybe even some better visuals, but what I want to pick is it Dreamfire? Is that Helena's dragon?
Yeah, that's Helena's Dreamfire.
Because that's the one dragon that doesn't seem destined for murder. That's the one I want to pick right now.
You are consistent, Sean. Love it.
Yeah, not a goer at all.
Not really. A goer. Yeah.
Stayer.
Not a goer.
I don't know. A sleeper, a dreamer.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Also, I want to say, Sean, about Sheepstealer. Sheepstealer has the coolest nickname, which didn't exist as far as I know in the Fire and Blood days. It's a show phenomenon that people have started calling Sheepstealer the Lamburglar. That's genius. That is a joke right up my alley. I love it. Yes, thank you. Bogsy says, Simon says, traitor, and sweeps broom out of the castle. Now, there's some good wordplay. Sweeping broom out of the... Yeah, I love how he just, retreated to the back of the army when he was like, oh, this is not going how I wanted.
Did you guys? I don't know if y'all saw, but there was a really cute BTS video of the actor who plays Simon Russell Beale, driving a little golf cart with Alfred Broom's actor Jamie Kenna in it. Joanna Robinson tweeted it pretty recently. If you go to her Twitter, you can find a video of it. I'm sure you can find it another way. That just happens to be the way I can point y'all to it. But it's just this. It's like a minute video of Simon driving Alfred around in a golf cart. It's quite cute.
He's not a traitor in that moment, He's a good man. Jenny P says, I can't stay for the live stream, but thanks for the coverage this season. It was great. Well, thank you to Jenny and everybody else that was with us all season long. We really appreciate you hanging out with us, discussing the show with us, having all sorts of fun, diving deep into a variety of topics. And well, even though the season's over, we are not finished. We will continue our near weekly analysis of both books and shows. So stick with us. Fun times don't stop.
We got a question, last minute question from Jill47. Can we talk next week about your thoughts on why more book fans root for the Greens more often than show fans? If that is so, yes, thank you for understanding that will be a topic for next week. Absolutely, we'll keep that and we'll talk about it. Because, I think it is interesting to compare book and show fans and their perception on the Greens and Blacks. I think, to me, more show fans like the Green, the Green supporters are few and far between, but more show-only people like the Greens than book. If I was to say, I think Green fans are 70 show-only, 30 book maybe, or something like that. I don't know if I'm right, but
yeah, I'm not sure what numbers I'd put on that.
I felt like I was going against the Green, trying
Nice.
to support the Greens. I felt like, and I think I'm a little more surrounded by book fans. And I felt like I was on thin ice saying, I don't know, maybe the Greens aren't so bad. I felt like everyone was like, what? How can you, Krista Cole, so good? I felt like I was.
Yeah,
I think I'm glad you stuck to your guns though, Sean, because a lot of that was from book pre-deciding and including from Manashea. We're not unguilty of that to a certain degree, but yeah, in the long term, it is more about how the actors are played. You can vote, you can root for the Greens because you think their actors are better if you want to. That's a valid reason to root for them.
Yeah, you can be like me, if you like the Greens because they're more camp, they're more entertaining to you, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think so many people are supportive of the Greens, as in they are the righteous cause. Yes, men should rule the realm.
Yeah.
There's a certain
find a lot of that.
issue with that.
I hope not.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're going to talk about this more next week. But thanks,
Yes.
Jill. Appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that, Jill. I agree. Let me echo Ashea with that appreciation. Also, the rest of you, if you have other questions you want us to discuss for our book to show episode, basically all the things that were changed, adaptational choices, diversions, just all our takes on that. If you have any thoughts you want to add, certainly it's a big, deep topic, so it's easily possible that we miss some things. So yeah, hit us up if you have questions or subjects you want us to discuss, but we'll have plenty to discuss regardless of what feedback we get from y'all. That's how it always is. All right. Our trivia answer: 2 other actors that were in both House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, apart from Jefferson Hall, who was, of course, once again, Tywin and Jason Lannister, and Sir Hugh of the Vale in season 1 of Game of Thrones. Steve Van Prooyen sort of caught one that we didn't. Very clever answer here. He says George R. Martin. George R. Martin was in the Game of Thrones pilot, which didn't air, but he was in it, and he's the Harrenhal tree. So I'd say that counts. I'll give you, I said you get a shout out for naming one that I didn't, and there it is. Steve Van Prooyen. Good job, Steve. Actually, second time getting mentioned this episode. So that, of course, that is not the one that I had included. Looks like Talon Kinsfire did guess correctly. I guess it wasn't a guess. Either you know this or you don't. Paul Kennedy, aka Ironrod, the counselor. He was a random guard at the Eyrie in season 5, episode 2 of Game of Thrones. He was just a guy in a
That one blew my mind, Aziz. I did not know that little bit of trivia. I knew Eddie Ear. People did guess that one.
Okay, people knew about Eddie Ear.
People knew Eddie
Yeah,
Ear. I obviously knew Jefferson Hall, who doesn't? But
That's
I had
cool.
no idea about Ironrod. That
pretty
is
cool.
a very cool little bit of trivia.
Yes. So Eddie Eyre, Ashea mentioned, he was Gerald Hightower in the Tower of Joy scene for Game of Thrones, and he is Sir Axel Bulwer, who
the
is
White
just
Bull and Bulwer, which is kind of funny. The two, I don't know. I think
he's
that
a
was
bull.
on purpose. He's a bull.
Yeah, you're probably right. So Bulwer is a house in Game of Thrones already. It's a Crownlands house? Maybe, I forget actually. It might be in the Reach. I forget. Either way, I think it's in the Reach because he's often seen as a Hightower guard.
Yeah, I think it's in the Reach because that's one of the children of Garth.
Okay. Yeah, so he's does stunts as well.
The Children of Garth could be anywhere. Shit. That's not.
So he paid for drama school, Eddie Eyre did, by being a performing jouster at Warwick Castle. So sort of being one of those dudes that jousts at medieval times or whatever. So real jousting, it's actually, you got to be in shape and be able to carry a lance, and you can get slammed to the ground pretty hard there. And not only did it pay for his acting school, but at became relevant to his performing experience here. As you can see, he's a guard and wearing armor and riding horses and stuff, being a king's guard and all sorts of things. So that's cool. Good for him. Eddie Eyre, good chance he pops up in... he's one of the few candidates to be in a third Game of Thrones show. He could easily appear in Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I wouldn't be surprised, in fact. He could be one of the random jousters. Like, it's played by an actor, but in the moment of jousting, it's Eddie Eyre. I'm going to go ahead and call that now. Eddie Eyre will be in episode 1 or episode 2 of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Lady Sophia Valarian sends a super chat, says, I'm a new follower and I've thoroughly enjoyed the history of Westeros. Well, thank you, Sophia. We will, so nice to hear from a Valarian. That's extra meaningful, yes. We will keep you company in the off season as well, while you're sailing about the Seven Kingdoms in your Valarian fleet. Or if you're managing the blockade. A lot of hours to pass, a lot of time to listen to podcasts, so I can feel for you there. We'll keep them coming. Like I said, our back catalog is large. We've been doing this since 2012, and it keeps growing because we make episodes almost every week, and that will continue. Like I said, next week we're doing a book to show episode. Like I said as well, I'll be a little more critical about some things. But also, that's not the purpose of that episode. It's not just to hammer the show for its adaptational decisions, but there will be a few of those in there because we don't agree with everything, but, we'll be fair about it. So thank you all again for participating in our show coverage, and we hope you join us in our off-season coverage, which will be mostly book-focused, but we'll have show stuff here and there. For one thing, we'll be talking about what's to come. And we're not that far out from another show season. Not House of the Dragon, that will be a while. But Night of the Seven Kingdoms, quite possibly less than a year away. And if it's more than a year away, well, it's not going to be much more than a year away. But I would guess it's around a year away. So that's pretty cool. That's something to be excited for. Puts us in a position to have a show at least every year, if not a little more often than that, going forward. So that's exciting. Good for us all here in the fandom. Yay, yay, yay. 3 cheers for us. Thanks to Ashea and Sean for being so great and having such excellent takes and helping make our show so wonderful. We are grateful for you all, and I am grateful for you all as well. For you all meaning the audience, and you all meaning Ashea and Sean. Don't forget to check out Magic Mind. The link is in the description. Thanks to our other regular contributors like Nina and you all with your questions and comments. Shout out to our Facebook group, our Discord group, those of you who hang out with us on Patreon or on X or wherever else we happen to appear. We are mostly all over social media. Thanks to Joey, Jesse, and Bran for the music in our show. Joey and Jesse made the original version. Joey Townsend wrote the original version. Jesse wrote a very fun blues version of it. And Bran made all set of new music for House of the Dragon intro that we love so much. And thanks to Bran as well for the video portion of that intro, which he also did. And thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our original intro and for the maps you see behind me. You all know what to do. Until next time, and always, Valar, reread us, and Valar rewatch us.